Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 96 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I hope you are keeping well, folks. We are now getting balls deep into autumn, but that was quite an image. There you go, folks. There's something lovely to start off this podcast. It's going to be quite a visual episode. As you may notice, today's guest is somebody who's been on the podcast before, and I think we got through 2 whole questions that we'd determined that we were going to talk about, given the subject matter and the experience of said guest, and we went straight into quantum mechanics and metaphysics and philosophy and all sorts. And to be honest with you, we've just been sat for about 20 minutes doing that before recording. So we're probably going to jump quite quick back into that, to be honest. But hey ho, we'll do a bit of housekeeping and get started properly, because I've missed you fine, folks. It's been a few weeks. I've enjoyed some time in the woods, which I'm sure we'll probably cover shortly. There's a bit of news from the States and from the UK that we'll cover as well. But without further ado, we will move on. That was French as fuck. I'm proud of that one. Today's guest is a Scottish author, illustrator, and the creator and host of the Cannaman TV Podcast, the creator of the Cannaman comics and producer of the Cannaman, what do you call the series? The animations?
Just Cannaman animation series.
Cannaman animation series. They were a previous guest way back in November 15th, 2021. That seems like so long ago. I think there was a whole prime minister and economic stability epoch ago, really, to be fair. They've also recently produced a new book as well, The Productive Path, which I do want to discuss as well. So before we jump too far into time travel, let's discuss that as well. But yeah, today's guest is Conor Macleod. How you doing?
I'm fucking dynamite. Thanks for inviting me, Simpa.
Thank you for jumping in the hot seat. I had a guest maneuver around, but as we often talk about, as you said earlier, the synchronicity of this being sort of episode 96, as you were saying, and us both being cancer signs, the astrologically astute amongst you may recognize that is the symbol for cancer. So there you go. If you don't, you've just learned something. All right. What's new? What have you been up to? It's been a whole nearly 12 months.
Just building animation series predominantly. I mean, I did I think The Productive Path, maybe May, I think it was. Obviously, I'll talk about that in a bit if you like. But the animation series is that's where my entire focus is. I mean, most people anybody that's following my channel, they'll see that there's only been 2 or 3 interviews this year. That's largely because the animations are. They really are all in, and that's where all my focus is. The entirety of the channel, even beginning from the very beginning when I started doing interviews and stuff like that. It's all my entire focus has been leading towards this moment, and quite honestly, it's kind of, I don't know if it's a relief, but it's certainly it's encouraging to know that sometimes when you actually get visions of what you could potentially achieve, it's not really a hope. Sometimes you feel like you're kind of being directed in a certain way. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that it's now, episode 1, Dream State, season 2, all of the stuff. I should actually maybe go and get the book to show you, because all the episodes, every single animation episode has been adapted from the comic book series. So there's 14 original Cannaman comics that I'd done from 2018, 2019, and I've moved them from, if you 1 minute, I'll just actually get the book to show you something.
Yeah, do it. Make a note here. I'll put in some little graphic there.
So this year, this is like 100% plug fucking city, but so this is the original. What have I written? The original collection 101 to 114. So this is the 14 original comics which I started in 2008. 2019 it was. That's what it was. 2019, and there's 14 comics there, and essentially each single comic has now been adapted into each episode is the animated version of the comic. So there's a level of, I don't like to say pride because it's inflated and it has ego later in it, but there's a level of self-respect I have for myself, because the reality is what I'm doing is the same as what Stan Lee did, but he just didn't draw any stuff. He got Jack Kirby to do it, whereas I've drawn all these and now I'm animating them, and it's cool as fuck because sometimes you just have to put yourself in a position of difficulty, and then everything happens. So at the moment, this is now episode number 8, and of 14, and then that will take me to April time next year. So essentially, it takes me a month to do one episode, that will take me to April, and that'll be all 14 done. And what I never said before we started, but because you're talking about Product Earth, but my intention is, because I'm also at the moment building on the storyboard for the Cannaman movie. So the Cannaman movie is going to be a feature film, which is going to be at a very minimum 50 minutes long. And Matt Clifton, if you're watching, bro, I'm hoping to premiere a product in if you're up for it.
let me make a note to send him a persuasive email.
As I was, because I was speaking to the beginning of the year, obviously, just before Product Earth and stuff like that. And that's what I'm really hoping to do, is because the timeline is exactly that. I have 6 more episodes left. That will take me to April time, and that will be all of them, the season 1 and 2 done. All the comics have been then transferred over to animation, and then from April until August, that will leave me 4.5 months roughly to collate all the drawings I've done to that point, and collate all the storyboard, and really just go full steam ahead from April to August to then completely complete the movie. And I would really like to do almost like a tour where I premiere it at significant areas around the UK. The idea of putting all the effort in and just putting it on YouTube, uploading it just seems anticlimactic. I'd rather to be, it's going to take so long. And what I mentioned before about Robert Greene in his book Mastery, and the reality is this will be the first master work that I've created, and it's not it's a literal sense to say it that way. If anybody's unaware, masterwork is not some grandiose, fucking unachievable, only guys that have been in it 30 years do. A masterwork is essentially a collection of the skills that you've applied, and then you just exceed your current skill level by going all in. I fully expect to feel completely insane by the time the movie's done. If I don't, I've not done it right. But yeah, so that's where it's at the moment. Come April time, all the season 2 should be finished, and then I'll be essentially I'm pretty certain from April time to August next year, I won't be producing content. I don't think. What I'm going to do is hopefully do just a 24-hour stream. I'm hoping to do that before Christmas time this year, where I'll just have the channel. I'll just put all the videos in a playlist where it'll be like an interview and then 2 cartoons, an interview, 2 cartoons. At the moment, there's 215 videos or something like that on the channel, and I'll just make it so there's a 24-hour stream continuously. And you can do that, I think, through certain platforms. It's like 30 or 40 quid a month. So it means then I wouldn't need to keep the laptop on. I could just just do that, and it'll allow me to still maintain people traffic towards the channel whilst also building towards this movie, because the idea of the channel going stagnant, it's not preferential.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's awesome, man. That really is fucking awesome that you're actually able to animate the comics. That is taking up that next level, and to do it all in-house is commendable. And if you don't want to be proud of it in the sense of ego, I can be quite happily proud of you with it in the sense of your ego. Because man, as you say, it is very few people arrive at even the conceptual idea of mastery, that they could actually culminate all of their skills and experience into something that is more than the sum total of their parts. And yet we are all acquiring and accruing this knowledge and these skills at every moment. Obviously, in some ways, they may be blunting the instruments that we have to use sort of a crude analogy, if you're keeping with me, and some may sharpen them. But either way, it's still experience that's still valid in something. It still ends in something. I think of all great sort of writers in the past, they suffered great tragedy. They suffered great misery. Some of them actually self-inflicted to truly live and experience that different life, and then bring it, or attempt to bring it to the masses. And I think anybody that follows that pursuit, regardless of whether it be ballet, carpentry, animation, writing, whatever, I think that is valid and necessary in this world. And it is the pursuits that we're kind of losing focus of as capitalism comes towards, well, I want to say the cliche of late stage capitalism, but ultimately, yes, it's becoming pernicious and cannibalistic and starting to eat itself. The arts are long since gone. Music is deprioritized. Everything's now. I saw something the other day of these AI softwares, the fact that someone like yourself, you go and produce it. I mean, I think one of the things that people would love to fucking see, I'd love to see, is a live stream of you producing it, to show the work that goes into it, how the body turns that into that craft. Because I've watched people illustrate, and still it looks like fucking magic. It's just
man, what a great word, Simpa. Great word to use, man, right? Because it is magic. Magic, not in the sense of ta-da, my rabbit with the hat, but the reality is we are magical creatures in the very literal sense. And what's so peculiar, perfectly right, and this is what I mean about that. Obviously, I said it before, but that's a magician on the front, man. That's what that is. And what's cool about this is, even when I started that's like the magic thing. So Perfectly, you say that, Simpa. So before I started animating the thing, I didn't know how to animate. And what you'd said there briefly, before I go fucking too diverse, man, I'm a fucking nightmare. But that's what I'm doing. So what I'm doing at the moment, I have maybe about an hour's worth of footage of me drawing and an hour's worth of footage of me like uploading. So I have a behind the scenes thing that I'm going to do, and my intention was to do it at the end of season 2, because then that'll be the original 14 done, and that would then be to show you behind the scenes. So it would show you from just a pencil and a bit of paper, because that's essentially what it is. It's a pencil and a bit of paper. I do the drawings, I then scan it onto the computer, I then color it through GIMP, which is a free software. I then transfer it over to Blender, which is a free software. I then record the audio, I do all the voices, all that kind of shit, give or take obviously the female voices, or the voices of my son's in it, he's fucking dynamite, that kind of shit. And that's what's cool, because in the future he's going to look back at this wee squeaky voice like, oh, my dad's doing this shit. But even to go back to before, like the very first animation I did was about September time last year, and I was working doing a shitty fucking kitchen job, just washing dishes all the time. It was fucking grim, and I was going home and drawing like a fucking maniac, drawing in the morning before I went to work. I'll be honest, this is true, and anybody that worked with me can testify to this. I would take my pad to fucking work and I would draw on my break. That's what was going on, and it was just continuously all the time, right? So I'd be sitting in the cafe and folk would be like, oh, you're on your break, and I'm sitting fucking drawing and then going back. So when I was doing that, it's that magic thing. I was also telling people, right, I'm going to do the animation series. I'm going to make this animation series. Now, the thing I'll point out is, every time I said this, in my mind, I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do this?
Yeah,
like, that's all I could say. But I knew the process of this magical endeavor where you, because what does a magician do? He tells you what he's going to do. He then does the thing, and he produces the thing he was going to say, and then everybody's left in awe at how it happened. Now, that little aesthetic of, ta-da, the bullshit magicians, that's actually the plastic element. But the reality is, we are magical creatures, and you see it through architecture. You see it through the numerous numbers of crafts and endeavours that individuals walk into. But that's what's so cool about this. So that as I'm fucking beginning to go, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? It just happened, man. It's bizarre. And this is why I think I would recommend to every single person that's watching, like, if you have something, doesn't matter if it's knitting, if it's painting, if it's fucking something that you probably think stupid, but you have a love for it, like, tell everybody the maximum you think you would like to achieve. Like, if you just say hypothetically you're somebody that's like into like fashion or something like that, and you're like, I want to have a Calvin Klein brand, but you don't even know how to make a t-shirt. Make your fucking t-shirt. Like, literally get an old bit of clothing, make it, fucking throw it together. It will look shit, but the feeling you'll have at the end of that will be a sensation of accomplishment, and that will be your fuel for the next time you do a t-shirt. And before you know it, you apply that level of sincerity and authenticity to your craft, and you then times, I actually think there's a formula where if you were to go like desire times effort divided by length of time equals your end result. I'm pretty certain desire plus effort divided by time equals your craft. And it's something like that, because that's what goes on. As long as you tell people, you again, we've spoken about this in the last podcast, but language is frequency. And your intention is frequency, your thought process, we are frequency creatures. So all of this stuff, man, it's like, it's actually, I have a fucking thing on the wall here, man, in the house that's like, life is perception, right? And I noticed this mainly when I was doing the animation, that there was an eye. So I had Cannaman, and I had 3 pupils in his eyes, and it was accidental because it was kind of like I was trying to make it so that he was looking one direction into the next direction. And what I realized was so at one point there was 2 pupils on both eyes, so it looked fucking ridiculous. Fucking home invader.
Sorry, someone was shouting in the street so loud it actually went through the closed window and my headphones.
Jesus. No, that's all right, man. He's probably telling me to shut the fuck up. Probably he's like, I couldn't shut up. But no, that's all it is, man. It's like, literally, we as human beings, and this is not, and that's what's so interesting. That's why Robert Greene's book, Mastery, is perfect, because what he details very obviously in it is every single human, no matter if you have a disability of any spectrum, or if you have anything in your life that you think's inhibiting you, the reality is it's only inhibiting you because your perception allows it to. We have anything at our capacity, and anybody listening, just tell yourself continuously that what you're going to do, and then do every single thing every single day, do little bits every single day, and just repeat to everybody, oh, do you know, in 2 years time I'm going to be doing this. And then you'll feel silly. People will look at you like, you're a fucking idiot. You might lose friends, most likely, that's part of it, but just keep telling everybody, and then you create this like defined aura of this new individual you're going to be, and as a consequence of that, the craft you're producing, and it's a metamorphosis, but it's a metamorphosis from the individual you were to the individual you're going to be, and you have to really go through this process. And that's what I've learned. That's what the productive path's all about, is that life is layering. There is a layering phenomena that's present from biology to all the way through from nature. There's a layering phenomena through consciousness. There's a layering, everything in life, from the process of a piece of furniture. When you're writing, Simpa, It starts as an idea, it becomes into a loose collection of words. It'll then be a format, it'll then be a layer, it'll then all of a sudden be a complex layer. There's a layering phenomena. And the thing it became so explicit for me is when I'm doing animation. Animation is like, like music's obviously another fantastic explicit example of layering phenomena, but animation provides, because there's people at the end, you know, there's a society, there's a fucking world at the end, and it all starts from a bit of paper with a fucking it actually starts from the idea, then it becomes a fucking bit of paper and a pencil, and then all of a sudden it just, you know, it becomes like magic. It's very peculiar, it's fascinating, and it provides like a sparkle in life, because what it's shown me, the thing I'll point out as well, what I'm doing now and books I've done and all that kind of shit. 10 years ago, I was a Valium addict. Like, I was fucking out my face all the time. The amount of times, there was one time I was actually sitting and I had the boy's mum at the time, she wouldn't be bothered me telling you this, but she was like falling asleep, and I had like these terrible Valium. We couldn't really get any, like, so it was just these shitty fucking white ones that had been food coloured with blue, and I'm sitting there and I remember I was like, it was awful, man. I remember my heart, like at one point I was like, I had like 18 of these fucking things. I was like, my heart went all slow and I was like, shit, I've overdone this, man. And I was like, oh well, like fuck, I can't do nothing new, I'll just take a wait. And I remember that, and I was all like, I'm thin now, but I was like super thin and shit. So then the reason I'm saying any of this is there has been a metamorphosis that's happened in my life, and it is by no means unique to me. It's a path that's accessible to everybody, and it really doesn't matter the stage in life you're at. And in the book, I have a quote from Mark Twain when he says, age is a matter of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. You know, and that's exactly right. It's like you can really achieve anything you want, and that's essentially my priority in life, is to try and allow everybody. I tell my sons all the time, everybody I meet, I'll be honest, I'm a relatively manic individual. People fucking, but it's necessary. You know, I'd rather be a so-called unique individual than somebody that is fearful. You know, because again, I think it was Jim Carrey I wrote in the book, was that he says you either take your opportunities or you remain frightened of them. You know, and that's essentially it. So yeah, Simpa, before I talk about for another 9 hours, man, on you go.
Excellent. So many jumping off points to go with that. There's shout out to one of my mates who helps out with the podcast, Chris. He has an expression of you make that rod for your back. And so, like, when he wanted to redecorate one of his rooms, he just stood up and just tore the wallpaper and went, that'll piss me off enough to do it.
Good man.
And it's the same thing of exactly what you said. And I recognized it many years ago of, there was an actual quite good the visual sort of cacophonous imagery that collided in my brain when you were talking about this metamorphosis was literally the externalizing. When you speak it out loud, you start to manifest it, and it's almost like it's the caterpillar beginning that vomitous stage of then beginning to cover itself. You know, I mean, it's not vomit, is it? It's silk or whatever. The process, anyway, it's an external thing that comes out of the creature to then create this space in which it transforms. And that transformation feels like a death, a loss. And I think that's what we go through anyway. We lose people, we lose jobs, we lose, you know, comfortable situations that we're in, you know, economic eras and everything else changes. You know, your security changes in various different ways, your desires, your wants, etc. But I think, yeah, you can control that change by manifesting it, as you say. And it is The Magician as well was a really good visual representation, because to the person that pays the ticket, goes in, sits down, and they see that trick, they don't see the tens of, if not sometimes hundreds of thousands of hours that goes into that sleight of hand, that goes into understanding it. It's not just them going, where do my hands go? They're understanding human psychology. They're understanding like the history of the craft. They're understanding like how temperature and lighting and all of these different things affect perception. And it's a wonderful kind of parable, as it were.
It's actually beautiful. You'd say that, man, that you described it, the language of manifesting it, equivalent to the silk as the caterpillar. That's fucking poetic stuff, man, because that is the truth. And when you say as well, like, the tens of hours that goes into the craft, that again takes us to Robert Greene thing when he says that, you know, 10,000 hours. I'm sure there's a number of people that's aware of the 10,000 hours theory. This is a legitimate sociological, psychological fact that there is a minimum of 10,000 hours for you to do anything to master your craft. And as Robert Greene points out perfectly, is that you're not biologically inclined that, I've been born with a benefit of biology, so I only need 2,000 hours. No, it doesn't work like that. Everybody starts at zero. Everybody needs 10,000. And that's just the way it is. And that's why with that, there's a real, and what's so cool, that's why I mentioned before the podcast started, like, I believe that the universe is conscious, and we have an interpersonal, every one of us has an interpersonal relationship with the universe as a representation of our own individual consciousness. There's a very strange dynamic, and that's what I find fortunate about the path I've been put on, is that I came across by happenstance, those kind of things, 10,000 hours theory, or the thing you're talking about your friend Chris when he was pulling down the wallpaper, that is a psychological fact that was found in this woman, and it was an Italian psychologist that noticed it when she was sitting in a restaurant, and there was waiters that had to take this enormous list of food. They had to remember this fucking huge, diverse number of food for each table, and the tables that they had to still serve, they remembered the entire meals, and she asked the ones that they'd served and the people had fucked off, they should ask them what did they have for the meal, and they couldn't remember, because the human mind is hardwired to engage and complete tasks which are still to be done. So the best thing, and that's a technique that I apply regularly every single time that I finish doing an animation. It takes a full month to do. It's usually between 40 and 50 illustrations per animation, so that's 40 and 50 drawings. Each drawing is about half an hour a time, and it's relatively exhausting because I enjoy it. I don't feel exhausted. I'm maybe fatigued, but certainly not exhausted psychologically. But what I do, knowing that psychological trick, is that as soon as I've uploaded that day, Simpa, every time, man, it makes me giggle thinking about it, how much of a fucking maniac I am. But every time I've finished it, I do one picture of the next episode every fucking time, because then it stops me from leaving 3 or 4 or 5 days, 6 days, and then that whole week of not doing anything means that I'm not uploading the next one for another 6 weeks. So I just draw a picture. I just do it, because then my brain's in this psychological thing, and it's handy to know the mechanics of psychology and the tendencies of human biology, because then you could kind of play it to your advantage, you know.
Yeah, man. Trying to grab a book as a reference. I was saying, obviously, before we came on, that obviously I've been smashing reading again after nearly a year of not touching a book, and it was because of Johann Hari's Stolen Focus. There's a chapter on that when they're talking about sort of attention and whatever else, and there's a concept. Now I'm saying it, I'm doubting that it was that book. I've read shit. I'm pretty sure it's in here, and it's basically the concept is like pre-commitment. Right. Is that even in your brain, if you once you commit to the thing, I will do rather than I want. Yeah. Even just that little step, you effectively, if you look at it neurologically, you are connecting new neurons and creating a new neurological pathway. We understand already. You remember that study a few years ago that really fucked with people, that thinking about exercise and exercising muscles can exercise muscles.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically the same sort of thing. Is that in your brain? I always imagine it's like sand on a beach and water waves.
Oh, fucking hell, man.
And so the water gets more ingrained, right?
Right, okay, yeah.
So and obviously what you're then doing with this pre-commitment is you're then going, I want to this, and that's the neurological pathway. So you take the first layers off. So when the water comes next time, some of it goes through. It's still in the ingrained path, but then the more you put through it, the valleys get deeper. And this is what I was saying about why I went to the woods and whatever else, is that neurological reset is to literally just go boom, flush everything. And then it just sort of clicks back on, analogous to, Jurassic Park, where they turn off the systems and they all start firing back on. Yeah. That's what I envision every time I'm in the fucking woods. Yeah. In my own head is that I'm turning off all of these systems and then allowing, the neuroplasticity and neurogenesis of things like psilocybin, of like DMT, to produce these new novel pathways and kind of adjust the volume of the normal consciousness and reconnect. Being in the woods obviously helps a lot, but being reconnected with our primal experience. Yeah. And I think then that you can see your own gameplay. You can then laugh at yourself and be like, Jesus Christ, I was so pissed off about X, Y, Z, and you put it, as you said before, into perspective. You've really, understood that you are not the things that happen to you. You are not even you necessarily in its grandest sense. There's you, the experience, then there's you that can think of that, and then there's still fucking you up there that's watching all this shit happen.
Yeah, that's why I had that. That's why I had that response, Simpa, because the fact that you used the metaphor of on the beach, man, it's.
Imagine it. It's waves of consciousness. Yeah, coming in is what I think.
I describe, because you're talking about neurological footpaths. That's what's going on in my mind. It's a footpath, and I described the same thing. And I used the beach. I actually can't believe you fucking said that. I've used that beach describing this to people about the neurology of people, and the description was that same again. I was actually talking to the boys' mom about this in the past. Was that it was about memory in particular? I was using at the beginning, where I was like, each memory is essentially a footpath in the sand, and every time you think of that memory, you're walking down that fucking footpath. And the reality is, if it's an unpleasant memory, the best thing you can do is to kind of like prime yourself, so that every time you begin to walk down that footpath, you throw up a positive thing. So inevitably, if you want to forget a bad memory, stop thinking about it, because you're going to erode that neurological footpath, that neurological pathway, and then it'll eventually over time fade to the point where it's no longer prevalent in your mind or present in your mind. Whereas and that's what I think is so powerful about self-improvement, self-development, that kind of thing, because the reality is the more and more you engage in it, the more and more it becomes who you are. And it's really profound, and it's fascinating. It's just so funny you use a beach, man, because honestly, I use that because it's a great example. It's a bland, fucking smooth surface, and then you imprint on it, and there it is. You've constructed something, and it's the same thing. Neurology is exactly that, and it's to know it and to understand it is to your benefit, really, because then you can hack into it to further it. Whereas you get a lot of folk that are like, this is shit, this is annoying, this has happened to me, and they'll talk about the same poisonous shit, the same negative shit that's been bothering them for years. And the reason they're still talking about it and it's still bothering them, it's because they're fucking talking about it. It's like, stop talking about it, hardwire yourself so that you're only talking about productive, positive elements, and all of a sudden give it 6 months and you won't even remember who you were 6 months ago, because you're like, no, this is all negative. And you can notice in others, by the way. One of the things I've noticed the most, because I spend so much time alone doing this stuff, it takes an enormous amount of time to make these animations. What I notice so much is it feels like I get cleansed by being alone. When I go into the company of others, you become immediately you notice immediately negative speak. Like it is like a fucking siren in front of you. You're like, fucking help, because it's so not part of you, because you're in a different realm. You're in a realm of productivity, and it's just, it's a really fascinating thing. And it's just brilliant. You would use a beach, man. Brilliant.
Yeah, man. I think, one of the things that came up in my head there that I wanted to mention before it kind of goes is why I think MDMA then is so useful, in that you are, obviously we know about its neuroplasticity sort of properties. There's still, I think the image in my head was walking along that gully, that gap, and just pushing the sand back in from the pathway you're then creating with a deeply pleasurable experience. Do you know what I mean? So I've often said that I've got far more out of music festivals and gigs and getting fucked up on pills and talking about my trauma, and you create bonds with other people, and you each other's surrogate psychiatrist for an evening, and you talk about deep emotional things you'll never fucking mention. You get each other's first name in a vagary, and then you both come down the next day, and it's kind of gone and it's away. You've lessened that trauma. You've in some way you've had a powerful, meaningful experience where someone has heard you, seen you, validated that thing in a way that isn't just, and you've spoke it in a way that isn't a victim mentality. It isn't from a woe is me. It's a, here's a fucking thing that fucks me up. Another person goes, oh, that's fucked up. How does that make you feel? But not in the psychiatrist cliche lying down. There's empathy. There's an actual exchange of, I don't want to say telepathy, but do you know what I mean? There is a thing with these sorts of compounds where you synchronize to another person. It's beyond linguistics. And like I said, the cathartic nature of the healing in the tribal setting together like that is powerful, but also, as you said, individually, of having the overview of them being able to have empathy, because one of the main things of MDMA predominantly, actually quite a few amphetamines, dependent on dose setting, etc., can produce quite a lot of empathy, of real quite deep, insightful kind of woe. And so when you do that by yourself, you can't project that onto others. You have to cycle through it yourself. So you then find yourself forgiving yourself. And once you can forgive yourself for who you've been, you can start to become who you are. And when you said of 6 months, like, dude, I went to the GP not long ago, and they showed me the list of things since my adulthood that they've still got open investigations. And they're like stuff from like 2004, 2005. And I'm like, that's like 20 people ago. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's my strive is for knowledge, awareness, and truth. I've got some burning questions in me that I just cannot get answers for, no matter how much I try. And I'm just going to keep just tearing the earth before me to get further forward, so I can stop thinking about it. Ultimately, like you said, all I'm trying to do is find out how to turn that dial down. And I've tried drugs, I've tried sex, I've tried festivals and dropping out of society. I've tried all the other things. And now speaking it and being heard and having meaningful, constructive conversations, I feel is that next iteration of it. You know what I mean? And I think, unfortunately, as you say, there's too many people who are at 60, they're heading to die who they were at 16. They've not. And again, this is not to blame anybody necessarily. We're all, to a certain or lesser extent, responsible for our own actions. But obviously, epigenetics that we know from our environment, what that can then do to us, we then obviously know the answers, air quotes, little a answers that are being given to us by society for a lot of the problems that are caused by society, then put us back into this feedback loop. And again, I think one of the things we haven't really spoke of that I think is vital to this is awareness. And I don't know if it was when after we recorded or before, we were talking about like enlightenment, and enlightenment in like in Zen Buddhism, for example, is sort of accepted as being brief. Like they have a concept of satori, which is brief enlightenment, and it's unfounded. It's just out of nowhere, and it's actually crudely could be described as awareness, as being present. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to think of Eckhart Tolle. I think is another guy who speaks of the power of now. Yeah. Obviously, that goes into like mindfulness and meditation and yoga and all those kind of things. But it's about, if you can truly be present, you cannot be anxious of the future or depressed of the past, because you are not processing either. You are processing where you are now. And in that moment, if you truly trust who you are, I have a cliched expression that I speak, not necessarily as often as I probably do, because there's not as many opportunities these days, because not necessarily as hopeful. But the bird on the branch doesn't worry of the tree breaking, because it trusts its wings. And it's the same thing as you were saying with self-improvement. If we're always shoring up our wings, we know that we can take flight. There is infinite sky, regardless of what happens with the landscape before us. And I think that's one of the things that we forget, that our perception narrows, and we go, well, I can't change the climate, I can't change the politics, you can't change these grandiose things. Of course you can't, but you can make little steps every day towards embodying that life. I've said before that I believe activism in its truest sense is being and existing in the world you want to see. Yeah, you're going to face a lot of loss of friends, as you spoke of before, a lot of backlash from society and from people that are very much committed to the current paradigm, you know, like to use like the Matrix analogy, still plugged in, you know, but I think you will then die with sincerity and a sense of honest integrity and almost righteousness, but not like a self-righteousness in kind of a false egoic sense, in that you lived righteously for yourself. And I think, what the fuck more can we ask for in that? If we had a society of people that lived to their own ends, and that isn't to say to their own limitations, that is to mean that they push themselves continually. You know?
I mean, just like you said there as well, when you've obviously got these burning questions that continue on, this ongoing stream of consciousness, of questioning. You know, it's like that's obviously, I know obviously you're talking about epigenetics, maybe there'll be some people in their 60s that won't be in that dynamic and all that kind of thing, but the reality is, the thing that popped to mind personally was Aristotle, when he's talking about, you know, a life unanalyzed is a life wasted, you know, and this is thousands of years ago, so there's not really, even cultural elements and that kind of thing, there's not really a clear, direct reason why some people don't ever like introspect or contemplate. And sometimes I have this, I don't know if I included it in the book, but I refer to everybody that's not actively engaging in what they truly desire. It's the thing, and the thing when you think what you want, when you're like, oh, I want this out of life, the truth is, the thing that you want when you at the moment you're like, I want this out of life, is actually the door that opens you towards the place that's way down deep in your psyche, which is the thing that you actually were here to do. So I refer to everybody that's not actively, when you've got people that just at a till and liddles and then they go home, watch TV, fall asleep, go back to the till, whatever. You know, it's like they're like a waiting pod of potential. That's how I refer to it. It's like a waiting pod of potential, because there's a pod of potential in that individual, and it's like they're waiting to be activated with something. Personally, for me, I think the thing that activated me was my oldest son. Really, it's like when in my mind, the thing that started all this was the books, and it was fake fucking, that's what I mean, A4 sheets of paper. I would fold it in half, and the reason I did these kids books, it was fat guy and zippy that ended up turning into this. This was fucking years ago, man. But I used to do this book. This was like the very first one I did for Amazon. I did put on Amazon, but I did them for him. And I was like, and the reason I did it was I was like, I want him to think I'm shit hot. What can I do that makes him think I'm shit hot? And that's what I thought. I was like, what can I do, man? I was like, a fucking kids book. So that's how it started. You know what I mean? And that was, so I was a waiting pod, because at that time when I first started drawing, I was popping fucking valleys all the time, and I was like getting coke to my face, and you know, this and this and all that kind of usual shit, because I was like, I was kind of like a car with no driver, man. I was a fucking all over the road, and that's what I felt like, and I was activated by him. And again, that's why I believe we all do have a true destiny. The universe chats to you and whispers to you, because even though he activated it just by being present in my life and me wanting him to do that, and that started the process of me going, right, I'll be a kids author. No, that's not going to fucking work. And then it just went from the next thing, cannabis is always present in my life, I want to be active with that, and blah, blah, blah. I kept moving all the way forward. I associated it recently with him, but the truth is, when I look back on my life, it was always drawing. The very first time I ever came across this stuff, when I was about 10 years old, and I remember I had a wee primary school jotter that you'd do maths in, and sometimes you only have the first 2 pages that would have any maths in it, and the rest was an empty book, and you take it home. So what I did was, when I was like 10 years old, I had like 10 characters, which were all animals. I remember there was a giraffe and there was an elephant. And I remember going like, this is my seat, this is my fucking cartoon. And I was like 10 years old, just fucking about. You then fast forward, I'm like 14, 15, sitting and computing. And I drew a fucking cartoon of it. I was teaching Mr. McGill, who's probably not even here now anymore. He's an old guy then. But I drew a cartoon of him and I'm passing it into the class. So that's 14. You then fast forward, I'm like 18. I got picked up at this is true, man. I got picked up at my front door when I was 18 by the high school rector because I didn't show up to my exam, right? And he chapped the door and I opened the door and I'm standing in my fucking boxers. I'm like, what the fuck? And he's like, your exam, come on. And I was like, oh, And he literally pushed me in my own house. I was in the house my own. And he pushed me in the house and went, go and get, and I was like, you want a cup of tea or something? He's like, don't be so silly, go and get fucking changed. So I went and got changed. And the reason I'm saying this is that I didn't revise, right? So I was just there for EMA and we went home. I was a fucking mess. So I sat and I remember it to this day, he was standing in the fucking hallway and as I'm sitting in the exam with everybody else and he's looking through the glass window and I'm like, I better look busy. So I drew a cartoon. So I opened up it was English. I opened up the sheet of paper. I drew a big cartoon of this stone guy with a t-shirt that had free Tibet on it, right? And he's smoking a big joint. And that was when I was 18. And then that was like 10 years old in the book, 14 drawing it in class, 18 years old fucking doing a cartoon in the exam. And then you fast forward, I'm like 19. I'm at college. I drew a big cartoon of the college lecturer on when I think of myself, I'm such a fucking pain in the arse. I drew a big cartoon of the lecturer on the fucking front of the board on this big whiteboard. So when he came in, I was like, what do you think, Phil? I chuffed myself. And I was like, no, the point I'm saying this is at that time, as I'm drawing these cartoons, I'm still thinking to myself, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And it's that kind of shit, So the reason I'm saying this is that the universe echoes to you in your periphery, your entire life. And if you have enough introspection, and if you have enough opportunity and be lucky enough to be an activated waiting pod of potential, then you really will get what you get. And sometimes I do believe that sometimes people are just designed to not be activated. Sometimes it's not, and that's just the truth. But even though they're not activated, they still have potential right in the core of their being,
I think it's a brilliant way of phrasing it. And I think it moves us on to a conversation that we had in the previous episode, really kind of determinism. And so the imagery that was going through my head there was sort of beams of light, and that there are these adjacent parallel pathways, and that just as you move through life, the marker, almost like Google Maps, when it's telling you should have gone right, you miss it, it puts it in front of you again. Yeah. You miss it, it puts it in front of you again. Yeah, I think that your whatever it is always there. And you can't ever tell what it is. And often it's the thing that you spend your life not necessarily rebelling against, but not ever seeing as the thing that you want to pursue. So I remember vividly in, I think, year 9 or 10, doing one of those like career aptitude tests on the computers that they did. And I went through it, and I obviously knew I didn't like kids. I didn't want to really be around people. I was quite a fuck this attitude at the time. And it came back author, and I was like, fuck that, I hate English. I hate writing. Fuck that. Did the whole thing again, deliberately tried to answer it as different as possible, obviously still not being like, yeah, don't want to work with kids, don't want to whatever. Boom, came straight back to it. And yeah, then many, many years later, obviously I struggled through fucking school because I wasn't in a mainstream environment. I was in one of these special educational needs in schools, which was very much a pre-adolescent fucking prison, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. Education was not high on their priority, we'll put it that way. And so then, it wasn't until I met Tyler Green at iSmoke, and he kind of just started effectively and friendly bullying me into being like, do it. And yeah, I've been sort of writing now ever since, and I've never felt more me in an odd way. There's still 90% of the time I have the obviously kind of imposter syndrome of just being like, how? I'll go to write something, and as you said before, the dauntingness is not the page. I'm obviously doing it on the screen, and I've just now accept my process. My process is written by at the bottom, word title at the top, and then just spew in the middle. Just here's a concept, here's an idea, and then just literally spend her day just swilling in my chair, smoking joints, drinking coffee, getting distracted, and just going back to it and putting concepts and ideas down. And then you end up with a 500, 600, 700 words, and then just go back the next day and you just kind of you read through it, that goes there, read through it, that goes there, read, and then fill in the gaps. And it becomes more instinctive. But you end up with that kind of, I guess, the balance of confidence as well. You've got to then work on yourself continually to not allow your confidence from other areas to fall, for it to then question your own skill set within this chosen niche that you've desired. I think for some people that's what happens, is that they start the thing with all effort and all will, and the rest of the world becomes almost too much. And instead of using the thing as a refuge, it becomes more of it's a hobby at best, or a chore at worst, you know? Yeah. And so I think people miss that, as you said before, I'm the same, of like, I can sit and I can fucking work for days and then be like, I'm knackered, I need to go to bed, but like, oh, podcast, and then sit and really fucking get into this for hours and hours, you know what I mean? It's because that's where my passion lies. It's almost like how we have a reserve that we earmark, and it's got like a little label on it, and it's your passion, your one thing, your raison d'etre, the thing that keeps you. I'm full of French today. And you can't access that in any other way. Do you know what I mean? And if you then happen to be a runner or whatever, you can tap into that. In professional athletes, they really understand that second wind, that extra little bit. But it comes when your passion is in other fields as well. You know, you hear of like the great literary writers of sort of history of going as you were saying, insane at their craft, literally losing a part of themselves, putting a piece of their soul into this. And it's kind of, as I described to you, I think before we started recording, of why I want to start trying to write some books, is to almost get it out of me. And I think that's what a lot of great literature and art especially is in all its guises. It's people they need to get it out. There's something in them that, like, I can't use language. I can't, in the traditional colloquial conversation, get you to understand or see this. But if I can make this, if I can produce it, you can get it, you can understand it. And it's such a vulnerable and raw thing to literally tear out a piece of you and go boof and go, judge it. Do you know what I mean? That takes fucking balls. Whatever it is that you do, folks, if you do it in the world, fucking bravo, honestly, because honestly, it doesn't matter. However you choose to work that, if you are doing that, I support you for it, because that's quintessential humanity right there.
I was going to say that as well. It's actually quite interesting, because again, 2 or 3 points, man, was that the thing that when you're talking about that you've reached a point where you're going to write a book, that's just perfect timing. Because if you think about it as well, the amount of writing you've done up until this point is probably half a dozen books at like minimum. You've got a fucking body of archive of fucking writing, right? But individually, it'd be like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words, that kind of thing. A book, right? And that's what's interesting, because it kind of turns to that biology thing. A book is going to be like 5 times that amount. So inevitably, it's going to put you in a position where you, by the process of just creating it, you're going to develop continuously as a person, just as a consequence of it. And what's so interesting, and it should certainly be noted for anybody that's listening, is that humans have this inactivated network of proteins which are only activated when you put yourself in a position of difficulty. So when you're in a so what you should see yourself as anybody that avoids difficulty, they are allowing themselves to remain half of the person they potentially could be. So every single time you put yourself in a position, this is fucking difficult, man. In order to complete that thing of difficulty, and when it gets to that point, quality, I've done it. You have, as a consequence of putting yourself in a position and pursuing the thing, you're activating inactive proteins in your body. And as a consequence of that, your DNA to a certain extent is changing by the time you finish that thing. And that's what's so interesting, because it does seem to be that's where the consistency comes again with that book Mastery, is that this is a consistent factor with everybody that does their craft, was that they engage with their craft, they master the fundamentals, and they hit a point where it's like an intuitive next step. And that's what's so important about this. It's intuitive. It happens in spite of yourself. It whispers to you, and then you do the thing that you've been whispered to. And it's very peculiar. And I keep questioning, when you're mentioning determinism there, very often I question that. Like, it's like, obviously I would say I'm very deterministic, but it's like determinism, it seems so subjective and small, where the reality is, it's like, it seems to, if you're getting a fucking, it's
too
like
simple.
It's too simple. But and what's interesting about it as well is like the free will that obviously is implied is almost not an illusion, but a necessary ingredient to create the deterministic direction. And the reason I say this is because so if we were to go back to like when I'm dropping the wee man off at school, I was thinking about this the other day when people say that, like, about parenting, and you put a lot of effort in, and then you got like some kid that turns into a fucking asshole, and you're like, oh, the parents must have done something. But the reality is, I really think that the amount of effort that you put into the kid as a parent is not as significant an impact on who the person's going to be as we might think. And the reason what makes me think this is when I'm dropping the man off at school, it was like last week or the week before, because as I said before, man, I never fucking stop. I'm sitting there and I'm watching the kids, man, and we man's here and blah, blah, blah. And what you see is 20 separate personalities lining up, getting ready to go in, right? So there's 20, I can see it now, the teacher comes out and there's these 20 already formed humans, but they're just a miniature version of who they're going to be. And in my mind, because when I'm looking at these 20 little kids, these kids haven't they haven't embraced the discipline that their parents have taught them at that point, and yet they're so idiosyncratic at that stage, which immediately shows to me that that's what you're dealing with. You're just dealing with a collection of inactivated proteins which are present, and as the kid moves forward in their life, and then they pick up bits and pieces, these periphery pieces of knowledge, or like social norms and these cultural facets, these things that do have a direction in your life, they're secondary to this underlying biological template which has already been determined. And that's what I think so bizarre, that you're at school and you're doing a fucking test that comes up an author and you're disgusted at this possibility. You're like, what the fuck, this shit? And yeah, it turns out to be your actual calling. And that's what's so it's like, what is that dynamic? That's a very peculiar thing. And what that shows me, obviously my own story, your own story, I have no doubt there'll be people watching this they'll be clicking, they'll be like, oh, that happened for me, I do this, and musicians, whatever the fuck. And that's what makes me so peculiar. That's what makes me believe that the universe has a conscious relationship with each one of us interpersonally, is that situation of you being given that moment of like, I don't want to do this, and yet it's like a milestone, it's like a landmark moment for you to reiterate now as a man that that's what happened. I've got the same scenario. That's the universe chatting. That's an interpersonal dynamic, and it requires introspection to fully appreciate what's going on. And I think that's why so many people regard the word coincidence as acceptable. When they hear these kind of things, they're like, oh, it's a coincidence that thing happened. It's like, coincidence is derogatory to the universe having an interactive relationship with you. If you remove the word coincidence and apply it as synchronistic, as we've mentioned, now that coincidence now has meaning behind it. And as soon as you realize that coincidence really doesn't exist in this, in my own opinion, coincidence doesn't live in this world. What we're dealing with is a collection of synchronistic events, which, if you have enough introspection and enough insight towards how the world is potentially, you'll see what it is, and it's something that's whispering to you. It's not something that should be disregarded. And no matter how small the scale, it might seem like, oh, that's lucky that I found 20 quid, even though I need 20 quid to pay this thing, but that's so lucky. But it's like, cool, man, that's fine. But personally, I do believe that we're in a situation where if you allow yourself, and that's where, coming back to doing the animations and being in a position of isolation for so long, and like, it's like what many would regard as, I would say, I mean, I've said this to people before, I think the level of the amount of time I spend alone as a consequence of doing these animations, many would regard as unhealthy. And yet I feel that I come up with the most, my best work, and I feel like I learn more about the world just from being quiet and quieting your mind and listening to yourself. And then you walk into the world and you see it all right in front of you. It's a bizarre dynamic.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah. One point to go off, and then I'll kind of hopefully circle back to where I was going there.
I'm sorry, Simpa.
No. I've lost the word. We were saying derogatory. Coincidence. Yeah. I think that coincidences don't exist. It's from any given point in a limited perspective. You can't see how it's connected. Everything is connected because it is all within the same space-time, same current. What we're manifesting, I guess, or interpreting is our universe, reality, whatever given nomenclature we want to ascribe to it. And yeah, I have lost my other point. Fuck's sake. I knew that was going to happen.
I was going to say on that note, though, Simpa, that's exactly it. I actually did an animation for anyone that's seen it. It's called Sacred Geometry. And I have it so that Cannaman's sitting fucking meditating and he contemplates these kind of things. And I wrote the thing, I actually wrote what he says in it 2 seconds after it popped in my mind. It was like this stream of consciousness as I'm sitting on the couch drawing. And I was like, fuck, so I wrote it down and then did the animation later. And that's exactly what we're describing. There is like an interlinking web, which is best seen through geometric fractals. And the interlinking nature of geometry and geometric fractals, which is seen, as I mentioned in the animation, that's only like for a minute or whatever, which is seen like on a micro scale as like geometry, or we'll see it on like cells, as we all know. You get a cell, you go far enough, we're not physical, it's all vibrational, but there's an interlinking network there, and it's built up from the ground up, essentially, all the way through. And I think that's what we experience when we see things like synchronistic events or of those kind of natures, is that what you're witnessing is a physical representation of that geometric fractal. And what you would see on a molecular basis through a fucking microscope, and you're like seeing two cells or atoms or whatever interacting with each other, that and then they respond in a manner which would be coordinated from our perspective. You then break that, that's on a micro scale. You then come all the way up on a macro scale, and what would be regarded as a coordinated molecule atom interacting on our perspective as human beings is regarded as a synchronistic event. And that's which is relatively like a coincidence, if you want to use that term, which is obviously derogatory in my opinion. That's a coordinated thing. That's a quarter. Like the things arrived on time, and here I am to make the most of this moment. That's a coordination, and you know what I mean. I have no doubt that if scientists watching this are like delete, unsubscribe, fuck that. But, you know what I mean?
but again, this is what we said of one of the reasons why I've been wanting you back for so long is that again it's philosophical kind of fucking physics is what we're kind of talking about. And neither of us here are qualified in this. It's from our limited sort of experience and readings and knowledge base. But yeah, I think one of the things now that they're doing is like quantum lock. I don't know if you've seen quantum lock, where they can like freeze graphene magnets, and basically as long as it's super cooled, it isn't affected by gravity. It isn't affected by any force. It just sits. You touch it, it moves. It holds itself. It's a weird thing, but I mean, I think we're starting to now through quantum mechanics and physics really start to at least conceptually scratch at the surface of the mechanics of how these things are entangled, how they operate and interact together in these I want to say synchronistic ways, in these ways that we don't understand. I mean, Einstein scratched the surface of this with like spooky action at a distance, and the two particles that were locked in their spin, you could take them to the other, theoretically take them to the other end of the fucking universe, change one, it instantly changes the other. Yeah. You've then got China effectively claiming that, I don't know the science of this, that they then took data from a chip on the Earth to a satellite because they basically entangled these things together. On a quantum level, and then taking them apart and one changed on the other. Again, don't understand enough of the fucking science of this. We're moving to a realm where I can't conceptualize of any of this because none of us were really taught of this academically in schools. This was still like not even Star Trek future. We're starting to enter an era of those people, of the pods that are enlightened, I think are not going to come from the regions that are going to solve this. You know, it's going to be some guy in a car wash is going to come up with a fucking cure for cancer. I'm not saying like he's going to actually go, oh, what is this protein plus this plus what? But he's going to have a hand in it in some way. Everyone's going to have, it's everything. Everybody is entangled into everybody else to completely butcher all of this language. But I think that then, as we were saying, if that your right-hand turn appearing in front of you continually, your destiny, your fate, your passion, your mission, whatever the fuck it may be, I think that's because when enough people collide and they lock, and it's almost like neurons in a brain to then conceptualize a thought in that you have, oh, this event happened in 1066 and this happened here and da-da-da-da-da. And these thoughts are all over the fucking place. And then one day, for some reason, you're thinking about something and the neurons just connect. All of a sudden, you see everything in a different way. You're understanding it in a different way. And I think then we're almost like a giant brain. I think that for all we can have our own independent thought and actions, the human societies, we act as one ultimately. For all we have binary politics and all the rest of it, there still seems to be a unifying experience under all of this that, I mean, my generation jokes, I'm 34 now, and like, we're all just fucking classic Simpsons quotes and do you know what I mean? We live from a certain area and all grew up with the same technology. We had the same PlayStation, Xbox games. We had the same whatever. It just, so it almost created the same repetitious childhoods. Yeah.
It does seem, I mean, that's one of the things that's quite interesting about this as well, is like life is very cyclic. And I think you see it, there's a thing I've said 2 or 3 times where it's like, you know, you might see, you see the seasons change, you know, it's winter and autumn, these different things, summertime, all that kind of thing. And there is an emotional equivalence to that. And I think that's where you can get, you'll probably find if people were to document this through a diary throughout the year, each person, and look back on the 10 years, what they'll probably find is they might receive opportunity at the same time every year. And it'll be in different forms, or they might be extremely motivated at the same time every year, or be really low at the same time every year. And I think these things are determined on various factors, which are obviously numerous and difficult to even define. But on your point where you were all collectively one experiencing one engagement, you know, one experience. I think I actually mentioned this in the last time we were speaking, man, was that I see us like that as well. Like each one of us as individuals, and we refer to ourselves as, I'm an individual unit, blah, blah, but do you know how I kind of vision ourselves as, and the example uses the human body. So the human body is one unit of organism. And yet inside that human body, you have billions of individual entities, to use that word, such as cells, and each cell serves a different purpose. And yet so from the perspective, it seems ridiculous, but from the perspective of a cell, you're a single cell, you're just you're going to go around there and fix that and then fuck off, all that kind of shit. But on the macro scale, you're so that's billions contained within one. So it really, and that's what I mean about that's why I did the animation about the sacred geometry, is that the reality is, we are all, it's like it's that layering thing, but I have this thing where it's like the more you look at a single point, the more that single point becomes more complex. And that's what I would say represents for that thing. So every time if you look at a cell, build it up, then you've got a fucking human organism, and then you've come even further from that, you've got a human society, you've got a country, you've got a town, you've got, like, it never stops. And I think that's what the layering phenomena is that I was mentioning before about the animation. These are little periphery aesthetic examples of a greater reality. That's what's going on. There is like things like creating music and all that kind of thing. The process of creating music will almost be identical to the process from a molecule all the way through to how galaxies are formed. And it sounds so silly, it sounds probably unrealistic, but that is how it's perceived. There's a layering phenomena and everything. And do you know what makes me more confident in this thing, not only the fact that it feels like there's intuition screaming at me that that's the way this life is that you look at the so-called occultist societies. Occult's not a negative word, it just means hidden, obviously. But you look at these occultist societies, that's what they talk about. You go thousands of years ago, and you've got occultist societies, Kabbalistic societies talking about as is above, so is below. That's a very famous term, that what you see on the macro is represented on the micro. And yet that's thousands of years ago, before we had technology to prove this through scientific methods. And that's as you mentioned before, that's a philosophical, intuitive thought process, which if you fast forward the way now, seems to be very much the reality. And I think that's what it should be, like what should be credited is that the human ability to intuit should be given more credibility, because intuition is probably the most underrated sense or ability that humans have. Intuition can not only save your life, but it can build your life. And yet you like trying to find, what the fuck is intuition? A spidey sense? Are you kidding me? What is intuition?
It's a form of intelligence. I mean, I butcher Freud and say of the three states of consciousness of the ego, the superego, and the id is that it's your head, your heart, your hara. So hara being the old word for instinctive intelligence, and your heart being the emotional center, and your brain being the processing center. Linguistics, fucking complex mathematics, etc. With the frontal lobe, and I think that when you align these states, when you meditate or you kind of deliberately remove yourself from society, like I sort of did with the woods, you operate where all of them are in alignment. So you want food, you need food, so you're hungry. So instinct goes, right, we need to find fucking food. Quickly, brain then hasn't got all the other distractions, so it's like, all right, we need food. So then you then have an emotional almost reaction to, I get to really enjoy this food, and you're present with it. It's the alignment of these sort of states, I think, is vitally important. And yeah, it is basically like a spidey sense almost. It works faster than you. You've got to remember, even our eyes taking information, what is it, like 8,000th of a second we process after we've seen the image, sort of thing. So we're always delayed by what the fuck is happening. Then you've got to think of the delay, obviously, when you then got to speak something and act. Whereas that sort of thing will pull you back when you're about to step in front of a bus. It makes you do something sort of silly, and you catch yourself and you go, what the fuck was that? And it was your body perceived a danger that just didn't happen to manifest in that moment, sort of thing. And some people become quite heightened with that, in the same way your emotional intelligence gets, people get to describe themselves as empaths, where they're just so aware, as you described it before, of the negativity, and they absorb all this stuff and it weighs heavy on them. And then obviously you've got people that are just entirely sort of like problem solvers and are just driven by sort of information, but then can't humble themselves, keep themselves in check. And I think that as a society, we only really value cognitive intelligence because it works well for productivity under capitalism.
Yeah, and it's also like the most explicit empirical thing that's in science. You have to have this academic foundation of intelligence. You attempt to apply intuition towards a scientific experiment and watch yourself get laughed at the fucking room. It's like, I intuitively think this will happen, mate. Sit down, take his white coat. He's no.
But it's interesting though. But we have gambling. What's gambling is betting. People using their intuition to try and make money. It's an interesting. I've lost my other fucking point. Damn it! I've just got some new cherry pie recently, and I think it's.
I have actually purposely not smoked today, man, because I knew we were going to be talking, and I know that's what's been happening, because I've been like smoking. I've been trying to use it more as a tool recently, and so that's what I've been doing. I'll have like a toke, 2 tokes, and I'll start getting busy working on that, and that's what I've realised, man. Is like, I have like half a joint, man, and nothing gets done. So, fuck's sake, man. So I'm literally at a stage where I'm like, right, man, I'll just take a couple of, like, half a joint before I go to my bed, kind of thing, as I'm watching something.
I really slowed down when I came back from the woods, but it's tradition. It's recording. I've got to have to. What does Bill Maher say? Clover cigarettes, in case you're listening, YouTube. for the show, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But yes,
right.
evidently this one is having a consequence. Shout out to BSB, you've produced a good cherry pie there, lads.
Nice.
But yeah, in terms of what we're saying, sort of consciousness, it's weird though, because we use the intellectual that then becomes sort of the academic pursuits to try and understand the others, to try and understand like a mother's instinct. We've spent fucking millions trying to understand how like a parent can understand when a kid's feeling pain. Do you know what I mean? It started with people like what the fuck was his name, behavioralism guy, B.F. Skinner and all them and Pavlov and forever we're trying to understand instinctive response sort of thing. And then we've got the entirety of antiquity and human history up to now trying to understand dreaming. Love, for fuck's sake, is one of the largest aspects of human life, and none of us can quantify it.
Yeah.
Can you fuck? We've spent forever trying to, and we still just, it's a feeling. Yeah. And then even that becomes abstract of what then the fuck is a feeling. Again, it's then a separate kind of intelligence. If you think one thing and you can feel another, that's two forms of like, that's an intellectual conversation or an invitation to one in your own consciousness to then go, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? And then if you can quieten yourself, you'll often hear your instinct kind of go and make it. You know, they often say like if you're stuck between one or like a decision of A and B or 1 and 2, you know what I mean? Is to flip a coin, and in the air, you'll know which one you wanted it to be before you've even caught it. You've got the heads is this, tails that. And then, but you claim the one you want, you flick it in the air, and you already, you instantly, that instinct kicks in and goes, that I wanted this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because what popped to mind when you're talking about the intelligence thing about science and stuff like that was like, again, I'm like, similar to yourself, man, as I could see from some of the Buddhist stuff and that you've got on the go. I think maybe in your living room or something like that, with some of the pictures you put up, was that like I'm a huge fan of like the I Ching and Buddhism and Stoicism, these kind of things. And in the Tao, they say that the more you focus on an individual element of the Tao, whatever, Scottishness fucking butchering this shit here, man. But it's like in the if you're only focused on one element of the Tao, you lose all sense of what the Tao is. And if you look at science, it's exactly that. They specialize in one factor, and you specialize in biology or chemistry or physics. And the reality is, you then become narrow visioned towards that. And I think that's what's so important about when you mentioned about meditation, and you perfectly said by meditating it allows all the other senses to become into alignment with the external. That's perfect, because that's essentially what's required. Is like realignment of baseline. Because at baseline, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the Tao for what it is. There's this unified field of interaction, and you're not even a fucking leaf in the wind, and that's why it's really important to, I think, to be honest. I mean, I say this to my sons all the time. It's important because he was actually my oldest. He was talking about the BBC, and he was, the BBC said this, BBC said that, and I was telling him he's 17, and I was like, you have to remember, buddy. I was like, BBC is like only watching just say Rangers TV. I was like, there's tons of other football teams as well. I was like, the best thing to do, I was like, is to look across a diverse range of media. I was like, you should look at things like Al Jazeera, RT News, Press TV, BBC as well, if you want, and all these different other media organisations, because what you're going to get is a broad spectrum insight towards what's actually going on. And the same thing happens with general knowledge. And I don't mean general knowledge in a pop sense. I mean general knowledge in what's going on in the universe and life and the world, blah, blah. To look at only the Tao, to look at only, like Christianity or only science, is to only look at a part of the entirety of the machine. And in order to truly understand, not even understand, because none of us are in a position of truly understanding ever. We can't be. We're too fallible. But to get into a position where you feel confident that you're at least attempting to learn in the right direction requires you to look at all of them. It requires that, because then you could at least have an insight, or at the very minimum, by looking at all the diverse ranges of, and particularly cross-cultural attempts at understanding the same thing. So if you look at philosophy, as we've mentioned, and they're describing the mechanics of the universe, and then it's very to your benefit to then nip over to science and look at what the science is saying about it, because these are two separate dynamics, which are essentially, if they come to the same conclusion, you're looking at a fundamental normative truth as a consequence of that. Whereas if you only look at science, then you get bogged down and then you disregard any other form of thought. But it's very humbling to look cross-culturally and to look at as diverse a range of human knowledge as you can, because it's invigorating. You kind of you feel like it feels like you're running down the rabbit hole. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Oh. I think for me, it's kind of the feeling I get when I read a book over reading an article online or something like that, that you're almost being kind of welcomed into a secret society of knowledge that is shared in a different way, in a slow, locked way. As I said to you prior to recording, one of the books I decided to reread, actually, I read in the woods, was 1984. And obviously, of how they modify, like Winston's job is to modify and change the news to make sure that yesterday reflects what today's truth is. Do you know what I mean? And we live in an age where even if that isn't necessarily fucking true, we're still seeing that everything is fallible, changeable. It's moving so fucking fast. It's hard to physically hold knowledge in your hand, but it's this continual stream. You have to then get into the water and go with it. You can't just go and fill a cup and go, I now have knowledge. It's not. You have to strip off and get into that fucking water, and you become the water. You become knowledge, and it's not then a chore or a pursuit. It's, for me, it's satiety, it's satisfaction, it's a cessation, a stopping of, I don't know why so many fucking words came to mind there, sorry folks, of the hunger beyond not like food or anything else, but like of, I know that, satisfies for a minute, then the stream of consciousness kicks back in, the waves hit the shore, and there's a new, let's explore the different things that have landed. And it's, I think that if you don't take the opportunity to deal with the stimuli, the information, everything that's come prior, you can never then rely on yourself to actually deal with the stimuli that you've got currently if you need it. You can't be present if you don't have the computer capability, as it were, like in your CPU, if you want to digitize it in this analogy. You have to then, empty that recycle bin, go through those folders, see what the fuck is there. Is this relevant? Is this useful? And that is that introspection, that self-help, that cliche, it's not self-help, that self-work, that we should all be engaged in. And it's not selfish, but the reason we're told that it is and we're pushed to is that it's detrimental to capitalism. I think it was Aristotle who said that he is content is who requires least. And if you truly start to understand that, you really become dangerous to a system that is dependent on you cyclically giving over everything you can, selling your labor for tokens to buy shit that you're only stimulated to because you watch TV and it's full of adverts. Or do you know what I mean? You have these desires that are not yours. They are foreign, that are downloaded into you for you to then just continue about as a busy little worker bee. But I imagine even in the colonies, every now and then as they're flying about, a little bee in its own way must I'm not necessarily going, oh, what is it to be a bee? But must still have...
to be or not to be, that is the question.
Yeah, exactly. But then it must be, this language is so fun. Yeah. For that bee, it must be like, it must be like, you're just doing it. It's instinctive. You know what I mean? There's a word I went to pull that I can't quite think of, or a concept that I'm not going to try to say because I can't think of the fucking name of it. But basically, I still imagine that there's got to be an internal struggle within that as each iteration of consciousness, with each repetition of those neurological neurons sort of firing and connecting, that it must just do something random. It must just, that's why, like bees inside houses that just don't want to fucking leave or whatever. I'm telling you, there is something intrinsic to consciousness that despite our programming, our preset nature, consciousness rebels against. And the more you can strengthen that muscle that is your brain to actually discern information, to be critical, to be aware, to be, as least reactive as possible, as proactive as possible, then as you said, with the bird and its wings, that's you strengthening yourself to be able to deal with the bullshit of the world. I mean, we need this as a society. We saw this, as you were saying before, with science becoming, I guess, a new religion. It was once weaponized against us. I'm not going to say the C word, but during the pandemic period, in that we were told to trust the science, follow the science. And yet there were a myriad of individuals, a lot of scientists, saying that there's science and then there's what the fuck you're doing with this politicizing. And again, there was a weaponization of our emotional intelligence that then tricked us to turn off our intellectual intelligence and ignore our instinctive intelligence. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
And so I think as a society, to be healthy, to be functional, it needs the majority populace to be able to, at a global issue, to be able to be critical and go, wait, what the fuck's happening here?
Yeah.
Because we are not where we were 100 years ago. And I don't even know the politics of back then. I can only even guess at it, of the good old days. But politicians have always lied. They're always going to have fucking lied. So even any narrative that we have of history that we look to and go, oh, that's where it should know, it's never been what it's been. If when you talk to the people, they'll tell you this. You talk to anybody fucking 70, 80, they'll tell you what they've actually fucking experienced. And it's politicians have always lied. The capitalism has always got more and more rampant. The systems have got more and more unrestrained, and just, as we said before, cannibalizing itself.
Yeah, that's what makes me believe that there's a cyclic element similar to the seasons passing. But if you were to take it again on the macro scale, you could look at it as potentially every 300 or 400 years there's a cyclic change. So if you were to go back 400 years, you're looking at potentially the Age of Enlightenment, and they'd be engaging with thoughts and criticisms and questions and conversations, which most likely would be very similar to what we're having now. Questioning what's been going on, questioning the narrative that was prior, and these kind of things, and most likely I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, the further you go back, the more likely. Even that though, if you go back thousands of years, and people like they still stand the test of time, Aristotle, Plato, all these different individuals. I do think when you're talking about the politics and that kind of thing, that it's interesting because again, it's narrative, man. That's what keeps popping to mind. Narrative. It's like we're in a life. Even we have our own narrative inside our mind, discussing what we perceive the life, and then you've got the narrative of the television, and you've got the narrative of the work environment. You've got it's very peculiar. It's like, again, that multi-layered element when it comes to when I'm creating animations. It's so weird, man. I wish I could take this fucking picture off the wall and show you, but it'd be a bit effort. But honestly, it's so bizarre how that you really can see the mechanics of life through things that would ordinarily be disregarded. You'd be like, that's non-related, and yet it's like, again, that whole focus on a single point, it becomes more complex. It's like, that's what it seems to be, and I think that's why very often it frustrates me.
Sorry to interject a second. The thing that just came into fucking mind there is the Christian thing of fucking, what does Jesus say? Lift a stone and you will find me. Break a whatever it is and I am there. Right. It's the key. It's the answer. And I'm not saying Christianity or Jesus is the answer. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying here, folks. I think I've made my religious stance pretty fucking clear this far. Although I will say I am trying to find a Christian prohibitionist at the minute to come on as a guest and kind of have a cannibalism and all of that stuff sort of conversation, you know what I mean?
Oh wait, in fact, you know who you should get on? Because I was going to email him, but I never got around to it. But there's a guy that wrote, he would be brilliant. I'm pretty certain he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, but considering Dennis McKenna and your fucking line of people, man, I have no doubt he'd be up for it. But he wrote a book called Warn Your Children, or something like, what was it? Tell Your Kids or Tell Your Children. And it was all about how cannabis is like super crazy, dangerous, is going to turn. His main thing was that cannabis is related to aggression. And that cannabis causes people to be aggressive. That guy. You should get him on, man. He'd be fucking brilliant.
Yes, I know exactly who you mean, but I can't pull his name. The Bad Hitchens. That's a terrible way of describing it. There was two brothers. One of them was obviously very more liberal than the other. I can't remember the names of them. And the older one died. And I don't want to say the good one. I'm really butchering this. Oh, come on.
Oh, do you mean like Christopher Hitchens? And that
yeah. Christopher and Peter Hitchens. It's Peter Hitchens is the guy who's in the UK has been pushing infinitum that cannabis is related to violence. He started publishing pieces in not the Guardian, Telegraph maybe, or something of that kind of ilk. Basically claiming like terrorist suicide bombers and stuff. And then there was obviously some kid in Britain, I think the bombing of I can't even say a name, Grande, I can't.
Right.
Do you know who I mean? The singer. Ariane
Grande or something.
I can't pronounce her name without seeing it written down right now. I cannot pronounce it. But you know who I mean? Yeah, there was a bomb at Manchester Stadium. Obviously, tragedy. Rest in peace to the people who obviously died and maimed. But the guy who perpetrated it, Peter, basically came and said, "Oh, there's history of cannabis. He uses cannabis. Ergo, he did it because of cannabis." So it was very much like a whoa. Yeah. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting episode.
If you could get him on, that'd be phenomenal. But definitely that did with the book, because he was like proper fucking raging. And the thing is as well, when they say that like cannabis is relating to like aggression and blah blah blah, it's like what they're essentially doing is being extremely selective, and they're choosing people who have overindulged and who already have a tendency towards that kind of behaviour. And as we all know, because when I was reading over this stuff before I was going to email him, obviously fell on its arse, but in my mind I was like, well, it makes sense in the sense that they would go, oh, cannabis causes aggression in these individuals, because cannabis is like the amount of the on the limbic system, the amount of cannabinoid receptors, which are that's essentially your central area of interaction. Essentially, when you ingest cannabis, is that it's the nucleus of the brain when you're ingesting cannabis. That's what causes the emotional response, is because of the diverse range. And I just thought it was extremely naive and just so selective that he would create an entire book based on this small fraction. It's in the same sense as turning around and saying that, in fact, it's not the same as that because alcohol is known for that. But the point is, the point is, cannabis is a tool and it should be utilized in a sense. And if you like, and depending on how you use it, will be reflective of its end result. If you're an individual that requires a certain amount of cannabinoids for medicine, that will be.
Is it Alex Berenson?
That's the guy, man. That's the guy.
Tell your children the truth about marijuana, mental illness, and violence.
Yeah, that's right. And it's ridiculous because that's what they're doing. They're taking a small fraction of highly sensitive individuals whose consumption was not proportionate with their biological requirement, and as a consequence of that, there was a negative response. It does not reflect the fucking plant. You put a cannabis plant in a fucking living room and watch it hit somebody, it won't move. And that's the whole point. It's like cannabis is a tool, and that's the thing that bugs me so much is that the reality is, actually, I've said this to people in the past, do you know even the negative sides of cannabis should be told to people as an example that it's fucking better than everything else available? Oh yeah, cannabis, one of the side effects that will give you dry mouth and it'll give you some like red eyes and you might feel comfortable and know what to move. Fucking hell, man. That's way better than everything else. So that's what always, when I look at the side effects of these things, like even the side effects are evidence that cannabis should be fucking legal. You know, it's ridiculous, man.
This looks mental.
That guy's
whether I can justify a tenner to actually buy that to read, but geez, so yeah, former New York Times reporter, award-winning author. And this was obviously written quite a while ago because the bio on it says, or the synopsis says that it was recreational marijuana is legal in 9 states. Obviously, that's closer to 19 or 20 at this point. But yeah, most of all, THC, the chemical in marijuana responsible for the drug's high, can cause psychotic episodes. After decades of studies, scientists no longer seriously debate if marijuana causes psychosis. That is genius language.
Yeah.
Fucking genius. So obviously that's the lie, can cause psychotic episodes. But then after decades of studies, scientists no longer seriously debate if marijuana causes psychosis because it doesn't.
Yeah.
But the way they present it, it's why I love and hate this fucking language of ours. It's so powerful, so manipulative. It's like, so he's putting a presupposition, he's making a claim, and then he's putting a what's the word I'm looking for? Relevant fucking sentence on afterwards, but it makes it a completely different, like reading the sentence of it. Oh, all right. He's somewhat of a guy. Actually, looking at that guy's profile, I'm gonna have to maybe make it.
I guess he's a better, right? Because when he goes into Rogan, he does the Joe Rogan thing, man. Obviously, as you cannabis, fucking Joe Rogan, he loves it, but it's brilliant. He does a really good job. But what's cool when I was reading over that guy's stuff is exactly what you're describing when he says stuff like, he would say things like, everybody knows that this, and then insert the rest of the sentence. Like, just because you say like scientists have said, that doesn't mean scientists have fucking said. You might have had one guy having a fucking pint and casually say, oh, he's a scientist, so scientists have said. It's like, and it's that seems to be pretty consistent. And the thing that should be
scary eyes.
The thing that should be said is that the reality is every substance will have a small fraction, or depending on the substance, a large fraction of individuals that will be sensitive to it, and there'll be negative consequences as a result of their ingestion. But that does not. But these things should be put on a scale of proportion. And the truth is, as we all know, man, it's like, alcohol is the deadliest one. Alcohol is the most deadly fucking, 1 in 5 deaths, 5% of all diseases. It shouldn't be a conversation anymore.
Exactly. It's interesting. He spent the past few years writing about COVID by the looks of it. He's also a novelist, likes to write about fictional CIA agents. Interesting. Interesting that somebody of that kind of ilk as a reporter would go the way. Actually, no, it's not, because we live in a world where obviously certain things have to have certain legitimacy. So I, for example, even with lived experience and with the people that I know in the knowledge base and everything that we produce and all the conversations and everything, that's not relevant to them. That's bullshit. From their position and their perspective, we're druggies doing druggy stuff. Mm-hmm. So I can understand that. They'll go to the other legitimate sources that are repeating the narrative, and the narrative is cannabis is bad. Why? Because we say it's bad.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, that's the same thing. That's the reason, I'll be honest, Simpa, that's the reason why I wrote that fucking book, A Case for Cannabis, that one. that was that I wrote this before I started the channel, A Case for Cannabis. And the reason I wrote that is that's academically referenced, and that's got, like, I had all the research at the time, and I'm relatively chuffed with it just because of the fact that it's, a lot of the stuff's still relevant, still up to date. But the reason I wrote that was exactly what you're describing. I was like, I'm going to do a YouTube channel, and I'm eventually going to make an animation series, etc., etc. I was like, nobody's going to take me seriously, man, because I'm not I don't have credentials, and they're just going to see me as some guy that's promoting something that I enjoy. So in order to get credibility, I have to have evidence. And that's what that was for. And that's what's so it's that thing. It's like, we might as well be wearing a fucking t-shirt that says "I love cannabis." And so when you're walking in a conversation, people immediately go, "Oh well, I wonder what his opinion is." It's like, look, it's more, it's just sometimes frustrating when you walk into a situation and people know you're biased in some way without asking the reason why. Because if they assume that you're just biased because you're ignorant, and it's just not the truth at all. And I'd be surprised. And I know I'm aware, again, we all have an endocannabinoid system, all these different things. Some people are sensitive. Some people can't tolerate cannabis at all. Some people can tolerate an enormous amount. Man, nobody's died from cannabis unless it's fucking fallen on them. So it should be legal.
Well, I'd kind of even argue with the language of legal. I don't know if you saw the Daryl Bickler episode. I forgive anybody watching that hasn't seen it. It's about 3 hours long. But Daryl's a former UK solicitor, and we basically discussed kind of the nuance of the language. And we can't legalize cannabis because it's not illegal. So they've made it illegal for human actions and interactions. So cannabis growing, it's not illegal. Cultivation is illegal because cultivation is defined in UK law as the act of, germination is illegal. And cultivation and germination are both defined as the act of the human intent. Human intended to make that seed, which is a souvenir, benign, whatever food source. They made it into a drug by putting it in soil, by intentionally germinating it through whatever process, by then cultivating it. The drug itself is not illegal. What you are doing is illegal. Right. Do you know what I mean? So they come and obviously take the plants off you because they can't, or they don't want to then, for some reason have made it that they don't lock you up. But then you are liable to that inanimate object because you've then grown it. You are punished for having that object. The object doesn't get punished; it gets destroyed. It's a benign thing. It has no intention. It didn't know if you were going to make fucking RSO or FECO and fucking help like 12 people with fucking cancer, or whether you were just going to get real fucking high. The plant doesn't know. It's not until you've then given it that sort of intention. But the way that the law works is quite smart. They can't criminalize it. It's unlawful and not illegal. And I know that sounds like a nuance, but imagine the same with a knife. Knives are legal because they're not illegal. But being legal means there's still lawful and unlawful. So a knife in your kitchen at home, perfectly lawful. You take that knife outside without reason, like you're a chef going to work, or say if it was part of like a camping pack or whatever, you get this the circumstances that kind of lean towards it not being unlawful possession. But then if you were caught with that knife, then like I said, they would treat it as a weapon. It'd be unlawful possession. It wouldn't be that the knife's illegal. It's that you've done the wrong thing with the knife. So the way they got around it with cannabis was licensing and permission, that without expressed permission or license, you cannot do X, Y, or Z. And that's, kind of how they've done it. But other than that, that nuance, I agree entirely that it should just be liberated is the word that I'm kind of going towards at this point, is that cannabis consumers and, just people, humans, should be liberated. Of our consciousness should be liberated. We should have sovereignty over our sense of self, our consciousness at all times. Really, that's all we are and all we can really have in the world. For all you can, gather possessions, you can have a larger and larger home and do whatever. You still only really have what's in your fucking head. Do you know what I mean? And so then to not be able to lawfully be able to fuck around with that, whether it be through, ingesting mushrooms that happen to grow wild about this time every year, folks. If you happen to know some highly agricultural fields nearby that might be productive this time of year, there are wonderful nippleless little skirty little things. I'm sure if you quickly give them a Google, they might be able to help you. I'm not sure how far I can skirt with YouTube's guidelines with that one.
I was going to, on that note, man, I actually 2 days ago, I think. Was it 2 days ago? I got a video taken down. It was Dr. Bob Melamed. They took it down for a violation of medical misinformation. This is a guy that's highly fucking educated. He has like credentials coming out his fucking ears relating to everything we're discussing, and yet they took it down. And the thing is, that it was the main thing he was talking about, because it's frustrating, because what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go around the back door to then get it, because I don't have the video that uploaded it, and it must have been on the last computer or the hard drive or whatever. So what I'm going to have to do is I've copied the link, and I have to go through this thing called like past history or something, which is a website which allows you access to previous content or something like that. And I'm going to just, once I get the website up and running, just upload it there, because that's what he was describing, was the fact that we're becoming kind of sapiens. That's what the next stage is, because of our endocannabinoid system being deficient for so long. We're going to ingest a large number of cannabinoids in the near future, and as a consequence of this, in near to long-term future, we will inevitably change as human beings as a consequence of having this crucial ingredient that our biology needs. And that's what he was referring to us as. We're not going to be Homo sapiens, it's going to be Canna sapiens. And it was extremely in-depth, and I got taken down.
That is such a shame, man, because again, it makes sense that even if, again, this is why the content like this has to be able to exist just for conversational sake. You wouldn't walk into a pub and shut some guys up that were talking some bullshit about time travel. It's just, there has to be space for these conversations. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? We both openly admit that we're not academics, that we're not qualified for a lot of the things that we're talking about here. And that's not necessarily the point of it. To have the conversation is, in and of itself, the reason, is an excuse, is it? But to go back to where I was sort of heading before I get derailed, is, Terence McKenna and fucking Stoned Ape theory. Of us interacting with things like psilocybin and entheogenic plants, and obviously then with cannabinoids. There's obviously not necessarily consensus science on this. Obviously, the fact that cannabinoids are present in all invertebrates, or all mammals at least, suggests that it wasn't just humans having it in their diet that meant that the cannabinoids are there. It is then somehow another synchronistic event with the universe that happens to be, we're deficient in something that nature then goes, here you go. We haven't got a war with it for effectively 100 fucking years, but all that ever did was make it stronger and larger. And like you say, we're going to end up with a point where corporate legalization is going to happen globally. It's an inevitability. It's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about actually quickly, just to kind of get it on record, since it's news this week is Biden, but we'll circle back to his sort of announcement. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that it's going to cause a forced mass evolution, or at least in a certain subsect of the population, that all of a sudden, instead of consuming en masse effectively daily a neurological and physiological toxin and poison in alcohol, they then start consuming something that helps promote
neurogenesis.
What we're thinking here, balance. There's a word for it. I'm thinking homeostasis. It helps promote neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. It starts to promote the function, more correct terrible bit of language, my words suck today. The fungi improves the functionality of other systems. We understand this from reproduction through for respiration, and that's even just in the endocannabinoid system. They're now looking at a larger hub of network of where it's working throughout in the body. We now understand that obviously cannabinoids are effectively neurotransmitters in the brain as well. So instead of suppressing and repressing the brain, you're going to be pumping more into it, and consequently what that's going to do to a society, we can see that where cannabis has been, air quotes, legalized in various states in America, they very quickly start to have conversations about ending the drug war, about funding kids' education, about play parks, about, the streets should be paved everywhere and not just in the nice place. They start to actually, they have the resource to do it, but also the will. Suddenly people are like, yeah, I've got enough shit. Others can have some shit, you know what I mean? Like, if I keep growing this good weed, I am very happy to let this go, you know what I mean? And it's, rather than that kind of selfish, egoic reality that, especially in the UK, but Northern Europe is suffering massively, of a population, in my opinion, that is over-consuming cocaethylene. So they're consuming cocaine and alcohol together, and it is just so egoic of a substance, and so me and what's in front of me, the idea of helping another person. Whereas then you've got another subsection of culture that are just taking mushrooms and MDMA and they just want to love and help everybody, and they're just... We have these pockets in the stoners, and it's like, if we can just liberate our consciousness and everyone can come together, we'll soon find out what we've known all along. That we're all the same fucking people seeking the same fucking answers in the same reality. We're all different shades, tastes, flavors, and colors, and whatever else, but it's still in my opinion, it still feels like it's the same consciousness manifest. It's like the Earth is I don't know if it was in the TV or the film version of Hitchhiker's Guide, where it says that the Earth was created to basically solve the equation of what is the meaning of life, and the meaning of life was then Earth. to live. And I think that then it is to love, it is to share, it is to have those rapturous, enlightened, present moments that we get to revel in, whether that's being at the foot of a waterfall, holding your child, eating some really good fucking nachos, watching your team kick the fuck out of your rival team. It doesn't matter. It's that little pleasures, those connective bits of joy. I think that's what is the kind of the purpose of it. But in that, we're stuck with these grand questions, like what is life? What does it mean to be human? And there's a great deal of answers within, but I think it's not just within ourselves, it's within each other, because you have a way of articulating the same things I'm seeing, but in a way that'll rewire my brain so I can see it better. You know what I mean? So the more we can share this information constantly, not just homogenize. I've been trying to come up with a term recently for what I feel is happening in society, and I'm saying monoism. It's probably going to be something in architecture or art or whatever, but everything is becoming singular. So first they reduced everything to be binary. It's left, it's right, it's up, it's down, and whatever. Do you know what I mean? Through politics, through whatever else, and it became that you like or dislike this, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you know what I mean? Oversimplistic. And now we're moving into a monoistic society and world where it's something happens, they click, that's it, the grand old they click their fingers, and we all fucking dance to that beat. You know what I mean? Everyone just falls in line. And it's through self-policing mechanisms and whatever, but it's also like Pavlovian conditioning that we're taught to hate who we're taught to hate. We're taught to, we love this person now. I mean, look at the fucking Queen dying. I'm sorry to bring that up again, folks, but you know me, I'm a staunch fucking Republican. I am so against the idea of monarchy is offensive to me. The king and queen in this age, it's the ultimate symbol of why we don't have sovereignty over our own consciousness ourselves. If I will not bow to any man or woman or any human in any form or guise unless they have earned my respect. You will not have it through bloodline or entitlement. It's repugnant. I'm going off on one there on the fucking...
Not at all, man. Not at all. I fully agree. To be honest, one of the things that popped to mind there, Simpa, when you're talking about the click scenario and this... was it monoism? Is that what you're describing it as?
Monoism. It's a loose term. At least that's what I'm saying in my own head, so I know the collective term when I'm talking about it.
Yeah, no, I fully understand what you're saying, because it's very unusual, because internet, I think about, the large proportion of individuals you see on the train, see on the bus, and they're just on their phone. Actually, the next, nice wee fucking plug there, but the next episode of the season is called Day of Donnies, and the Cannaman and Donnie go to the Museum of Technology, and one of the things that starts off is that everybody's on their phone, and that's what it is. And what I find relatively peculiar about these things is the importance, as we've mentioned before, of consciousness. Now, the thing that precedes consciousness essentially is attention. And what you focus your attention on is you allow the door to be opened towards your conscious thought. And if you look at the way technology is, although it's allowed this unified field of information where you can access it to further your conscious inquiry, one of the things that's also very apparent is the level of control that's been applied to steal consciousness, and how these algorithms are tailored to promote a specific, again, narrative, a specific perspective of the world, and depending on the climate of those architects of society that they desire at the time, well, whether it'll be conflict through gender identity, conflict through politics, different form, conflict through this and this, but it does seem to be that there's a consistency of stealing consciousness, because the reality is, as we're describing, even when you mentioned it, like us describing, neither the two of us have credentials. I mean, I've got a white coat, but I'm not a fucking scientist. It's like that kind of thing. And but at the same time, what is it we're trying to achieve here? We're trying to achieve an extension of conscious thought through the process of articulation, and the articulated word is what it comes down to. And that's where political correctness, the reduction in what we thought was free speech, all these different other things. It's so important to understand that you need to preserve your consciousness, and you need to engage with like further dialogue to really extend upon what's going on, because it does seem to be that's what's happening, is just that it's like I mean, fuck, man, you remember that? We're essentially a similar age. You go back and it's like, stay away from the TV. You're going to break your eyes. You fast forward 15 years and you've got a fucking VR stuck to your face. You fucking kidding me, man? And that's what it's like. And so there is an invasive, and then you're going to the next stage is Neuralink. Although these things, even though there is the other flip side of technology, I mean, you mentioned it before, where it was The Simpsons, where it was like, I think there's a bit where Mo is like, when they're all kids, and it's like, Like I think it's like it's like Homer's mum. We used to be like this rebel, this hippie rebel. So they go into the germ warfare place to destroy it, and they're all like, "Yeah, fuck germ warfare, fuck these fucking scientist bastards." And then they're all running away, and then something falls, and then falls on Mo, and he goes, "Oh shit! I hope medical science can save me." So there is this paradigm of that. Again, it's kind of like the same as any form of substance. There is a moderation that's required in order to maximize the utility of the thing you're engaged in, and that moderation is distorted through individuals who have malevolent intentions. And that's where when you look at things like technology and kind of thing, there is a malevolent undertone to technology. Look at TikTok. TikTok, I mean, as I mentioned before, TikTok is essentially the best example for them explicitly trying to reduce everybody's attention span. You've got a format which promotes minutes content. And if your content goes over a minute, you probably won't get fucking watched. And it's these kind of things. And that reduction of that, and then you apply this whole minute content, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and you apply that. I mean, TikTok's only been around for a very short period of time. You apply that to a generation for 20 or 30 years. What are you looking at? You're looking at a generation of people that can't read a full book. You're looking at a generation of people that can't engage with long form dialogue. And that's potentially what could be a consequence of these malevolent things. And I'm aware that individuals will be like, there's a conspiratorial theme to what I'm describing here, and that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is there are individuals who have intention. In fact, it's perfect because I kind of want to talk to you about medical cannabis in the UK predominantly, but it's because it's the same thing. In the medical cannabis thing in the UK, they say that there's not a conspiracy behind fucking maintaining this privacy. There's not a conspiracy. It's like, what they should do is they should remove the nature of, it's a conspiracy that the UK is fucking hindering their legislation in order to fund this. Anybody who's watching, I did an animation that's called UK Medical Cannabis, and I touch on this, and that's all it is that they say it's not, and they say it so that they can disregard any form of questioning of it. So they're like, to say that the hindrance of the UK legislation towards cannabis, which has directly profited these private clinics, to say that that's a conspiracy is ridiculous. It does sound ridiculous to say it's a conspiracy. To say it's a marketing strategy, that sounds more realistic. Well, to say it's a strategic fucking move in the long term through various groups of individuals who financially benefit from this, that kind of touches more on what reality is like, capitalism, the nature of capitalism. So we'll just hinder that legislation going through, and as a consequence, there are fucking millions, billions going into these private sectors. But it's a conspiracy if you thought that. Take away the word conspiracy and apply a marketing strategy, and then you're getting fucking closer to the truth, and you can then have a conversation, because that's what's going on. It's not ignorance. Oh wait, we've never passed these fucking laws. Let's hinder cannabis laws at the same time as. That's what I said in the animation. At the same time as give everybody just a small amount of fucking like cannabis just to tide them over. And I'm aware it's good to have access. I'm aware that we do require this, but I also find it relatively humorous that the price that you get from the clinics is just below the street price, like just undercutting it. It's like, fuck's sake.
It is interesting. I'll come back to why obviously medical cannabis is an absolute con in terms of the language. But yeah, the Albanians that are currently doing well for themselves. Good on you, lads. You've owned basically every corner of this country at this point in terms of the cannabis supply. And yeah, even an expensive ounce from them these days is 140. And they've moved on from their dog and their Ami. They're on to their wedding cakes and various other things, and they're moving runts and whatever else. And it's interesting. The clinics are now at war with the international sort of gangs and cartels, and the domestic producer is in the middle, kind of being like, "Well, what the fuck do I do here?" And it's interesting. And to go back to sort of like words and magic, they did an incredible job with the marketing strategy of creating big M, big C medical cannabis, as in them both being capitalized, being then pronoun or proper noun, whatever the fuck it is, basically then becoming in and of itself a definition for something that isn't what the two words are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so then they registered, defined under the legislation that medical cannabis equals a CBPM, a cannabis-based medicinal product for human consumption, which is then defined under the guidelines as is and or a cannabis preparation. So basically, they're saying that medical cannabis is a CBMP and a CBMP is cannabis. So ergo, medical cannabis is cannabis.
Yeah.
So the only reason
all cannabis is medical.
Yeah. So the only reason they've created it's not even medical, it's medicinal. So medical is defined to the study and field of medicine. Cannabis doesn't belong to medicine. Cannabis is a plant. Cannabis can be used as a drug to then medicinally as a drug to then be used therapeutically by the individual. You can then extract from that through the pharmacopoeic procedure to then create a drug, a patented drug, which is then cannabis derived. You know what I mean? Or even like synthetic, like Dronabinol. So it's then based on on cannabis. That then would be medical cannabis, I would say, by that nature of the words, because it's come from and is of. It's entirely synthetic, so it's come from the medical field. Whereas then cannabis, the plant used medicinally, can't be medical because you're using it medicinally. And the same if you like get stung by a nettle, you could use a dock leaf or whatever. You wouldn't medically go and seek a medical dock leaf. You'd find the fucking dock leaf and you'd medicinally, which is the action of using something therapeutically or as a medicine, specifically herb, plant, or whatever the word is on Google, on Oxford Dictionary. I was trying to read the thing in my head there, but couldn't. I've been enjoying the weed today, folks. Hence the reason it's been a bit of an interesting conversation thus far. But yeah, the manipulation of that language, it also then creates a fallacy and a false dichotomy in our attention and in our brains when you go, well, there's cannabis and there's medical cannabis. And so if medical cannabis is medicinal, cannabis isn't. So for the authoritative system, it's wonderful for them because they can then go, well, this stuff in the pot that you buy from us is medicine. This is safe. This is cool. This is sweet. That other stuff, that's skunk. That's street weed. That's addictive. It causes psychosis. It allows them to keep both sides of this fucking cognitive dissonant barrier alive in society. So everyone's then going, oh, cannabis is mint. It's a medicine. Yeah, those kids, teenagers are smoking it. It's skunk. It's going to ruin their lives.
Yeah.
What are you on? Do you know what I mean? It's they're holding this is Orwell spoke of double think. They have these two fucking concepts that they just can't reconcile in themselves because, as we said before, the stimuli never stops. So they just accept the narrative, and because we're being programmed into this kind of monoism, that's the narrative. You just accept the narrative. You just go, what is it today? Oh, the Queen died, so we're sad for that. All right, cool. COVID's over apparently. Oh shit, I said the C word. It's over apparently. Oh, we'll celebrate that. Oh, so Ukraine's over. Russia, that's cool. What this? You just accept it, and you try and go on with the little minutiae of your life, forever being boxed in until you're like the cow when they go to slaughter, man. I think of fucking Cowspiracy. If you haven't watched it and you want to become a vegetarian, go watch Cowspiracy. I watched it on acid once. Ooh, me and my mate were crying our fucking eyes out the first scene where the cow, because basically what they do is they corral them. You start a big space and then you go one, and then by the time you're in the space, you can't turn around. And then the other cows come in behind you and you go forward and you get a little stun and boom and through and just dead. And by the time you're aware you're in the fucking corral, it's over. And that's what I feel is this monoism is. Even binary debates are an aspect, a key component of this monoistic society. In that, look at politics, left and right is all neoliberalistic politics. It's the minutiae of politics. It doesn't include socialism or communism or any of those concepts. It doesn't include any of the other potential ideas like localism, collectivism, fucking different tribalistic ways of operating. They're just discounted. If you're being political, it has to only be in this.
Interestingly, you say about politics, when I was at college, I was speaking to the lecturer, and he's got this fucking crazy thick book about politics. His degrees were in politics, but he was talking about sociology we were doing at the time, and he put out this thing, and he was like, right, if you could do one thing in politics, what should it be? And in my mind, that's what I said to him. I was like, the thing, it was cool because he looked at me, we had a really good conversation after it. I was like, if I could do one thing in politics, it'd be to remove all colour. Every political party is grey. Because what that then causes is a reduction in a tribal connection towards. Because I've always wondered to myself, I was like, I wonder how many people vote for Labour that also support Liverpool or Man United. I wonder how many people that go towards Conservative are also Chelsea fans. You know what I mean? And it's just because there's a tendency, a primal tendency.
Chelsea, there's a lot of blue in the colours of the football teams around the south. If you then look at already of just north-south divide, which is a strong indicator of your kind of left-right bias in this country, you might be onto something there, because obviously we know that blue causes calm. Blue is, it's reductive and chill, and red is passion. And we've obviously been fed this passion from the media machine. So then the people go to their political savior, the parental figure, because that's what we all are. I said when the Queen died, it's like the last adult died. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's that we actually realise that, wait, shit, now none of us know fuck all. We're all just kids. But I've always felt that. The older I get, I'm like, at some point I will become an adult. And it's just not happening. And
no, don't do it, man, because Walt Disney's got a saying where he says, if you remain childlike, you never lose life. Or there's a quote he says that as long as you maintain a childlike perspective, you hold on to wonder or something like that. But interestingly about the Queen, that's what makes me believe that all the main global events that happened, and that's why we're dealing with, like, it's regardless if people think I'm a conspiratorial individual, I'm not really that bothered. The Queen dying was noted in The Simpsons in like 2014. Like, it's like 2014. In fact, shout out to Rhea Green, because it was her fucking post that made me see that. But it was like that 2014. And then it's like 6-7 years later.
I want to point out though that the date on the fake picture that went around was a Photoshop job. There was an image that put the date as 2022, but the fact that the Queen was no. But you're right though. Even though that, and obviously part of that is it was rather than be realistic here. She was. I think she was 96, actually, it being episode 96. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, you get a 90, you've had good fucking innings, and you should be preparing for a good death if you're lucky. Yeah. You know what I mean? I want to go out like Huxley. I'm scared of needles, but fuck me, jab me up with that LSD when I go.
That's great. Well, Aldous Huxley, he's a great example of that, because even in his book, Brave New World is probably one of my most favourite books. Is because of the fact
just finished it yesterday, and then I've cracked open Fahrenheit 451. I'm going through all the dystopias again. I'm really rattling my brain again.
Nice. Well, I've got that's frustrating, because I bought The Island recently and I've just not really got around to it.
Dude, brilliant. This is his last book, and he puts his life into it, man.
Do you know what's interesting? This is what I've noticed about this, like things like fiction. It's so weird, man. It's like it feels like I'm like having a pudding or something, or it feels like I'm having a sweetie. It's like it's no, even though there's a philosophical sincerity and authenticity, but when you're reading like non-fiction, it feels like there's more of a seriousness behind that. Whereas if this fictitious thing, it kind of feels like I'm like just putting my feet up and I'm just taking some time off with this work.
I think it's that like academic kind of programming in school. One of the things I always noted of like, I'm still fucking pretty adamant that the reason we get forgetful when we get older, when we walk through doorways, is because when we're in secondary schools, we're compartmentalizing education. You do geography in this room, a bell rings, you walk through a doorway into a corridor of neutrality that isn't any of the subjects. You then forget or lock that away. You then go and you're not taught to connect the things. You don't go, well, how does geography pertain to history? How does fucking philosophy pertain to music? You don't ever really combine. You're taught that these things are separate and should remain separate. And sorry, I just wanted to get that tidbit out, because it is some of the I do think of quite a lot of it is this conditioning, and that we have to break free of it, however you get away from that. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. And interestingly, actually, just reminded me of the point you were talking about the language between medical cannabis and how they managed to separate it. And again, it goes to that compartmentalization of the psyche, almost, because of the way this kind of thing, that if you look, that's very, very, very similar to the hemp cannabis thing. That's what they did then. That was the beginning, and then you fast forward now doing it medical. I mean, fucking what's going to be next? Are they going to compartmentalize what is regarded as recreational consumption, and then again, it's all kind of probably sporadic, but there's a great book that I think anybody that's really interested in the level of marketing influence through every spectrum of society we experience, is called The Hidden Persuaders, and it was written in like the 50s or 60s. Vance Packard's the guy's name. One of my most favourite books, The Hidden Persuaders, because what he describes in it is the level of insight that they apply to the human psyche in order to achieve what their goal is. And then he puts the hidden persuaders through the dynamic of employment. So if there's a corporation that's trying to employ a CEO, they'll ask them about their private life, and like they'll ask them about their wife and this and the next thing. Not only that, they'll ask them about they'll essentially study these individuals in order to figure out what kind of personality they have, to see if they'll be subservient. And if you take that, and this is in the 50s and 60s, and then they started putting ads, obviously because it's the ad men, 50s and 60s, that kind of thing, so they start to really delve into the psychology of the human, of how can we sell the best products, or how can we sell products to anybody, how can we do this? And that's when they started to figure out about that whole thing of humans have a tendency to favour products that they're previously shown not in the context of buying it. So if you were to see an advert with a car, that kind of shit, and they to be shown it prior, and then you fast forward, and then they get given the option of these things, they then select the one that they've subconsciously seen fucking 3-4 weeks ago or whatever. And these are techniques that were aware in the 50s and 60s.
That's why Coca-Cola's advertising strategy is
frightening.
It's killed it, because they never sold the product. They sold the experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They reinvented that style of marketing, that it was never about the price of the Coke or its availability. It was, you saw that red, you saw that flush of the font. And
perfect. You just said you saw that red there, right? That's what the next point I was going to say, Simple Brilliant Man, was like, so the red, every time we look at our phone and it flashes, that we not the thing, we think that's a new thing, just to, it's our phone, just so we can fucking check we've got a message. You rewind back to the 90s, even before that, and you've got an answering machine and your phone for the house phone, and it's just flashing red. And now that red's a primal thing, because our eyes have a tendency to look towards something that's red. That's just a primal thing. I think it's to do with like fucking food and biology and these kind of things, like evolutionary mechanisms.
Blood and berries and
exactly. And then so that's in the 80s and the 90s, and then you fast forward all the way through. They're aware of our neurological circuitry, and the people that, and that's what's so frustrating, because again it sounds all conspiratorial. No, you're like, when they talk about like politicians and these are like not even bolts in the machine. These are individuals showing up to their work and going home again, essentially. They'll know certain things, they might not, whatever, and that kind of thing. But the reality is there's an umbrella, there's a societal structure which is in place which is obviously could most likely potentially be as a consequence of the capitalist dynamic to sell and the nature of competition. That's what the underpinning of the learning of psychology, because then we can be the best competition in the fucking realm, essentially. But even that thing, you fast forward, why do you have the button on the side of your phone to click it? Because every time you click your phone, even if there's not a message, every time you press the button on your phone, you're getting a release of dopamine and your epinephrine and your thing, and every single time. So you become addicted to these things. And it's the same thing when you're
strengthening the muscle memory as well.
Strengthening the muscle memory. Every time you're scrolling down your phone, you're not looking at the picture. You're scrolling because the dopamine gets released at the next picture. Now, to understand it, like the picture you're looking at doesn't give you the pleasure. It's the next one.
It's not even actually the picture necessarily. There's a study that they figured out anthropologically. They looked at metadata. God, this was a long time ago that I read this, many years ago. But basically, they found that it's the expectation or the anticipation. That's the fucking thing. That's the holy grail.
Yeah.
It's the moment just before the thing, having had the opportunity to want the thing, knowing you're going to get the thing. That's that's the mechanism. So that's just what we do with sex addiction. Then the people are not ever even asked about the person that they're currently engaged with. They're thinking of the chase of the next thing. And even then, as soon as they get it, they almost don't want it. And it's like, it's the same with most other things. It's that this is how you can have like healthy relationships with things, is you then understand that mechanism and you make it work to your advantage. But if you don't understand it, or any of these sort of things, or even, was it Bernard Hayes or whatever the fuck his name was?
Edward Bernays.
Yeah, it's Freud's second cousin. And he basically took all of psychoanalytics and dumped that into the ad guys and went, have you considered? And fuck me, look at the state of what we're in now. Yeah, but it's weird that there's a whole subsect of society, and I'm one of these. If I see an advert, something in me immediately goes, never mind that. Like, even though 99% of the things that are on adverts are not things I want in my life anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of the things that my joys in life actually is listening to, say, like classic FM. I like classic FM in the car. Every now and then I'll have like gangster rap, or I'll have some fucking hardcore D&B or gabba. I have a very variety of playlists. But I'll put on fucking classic FM and just to have the adverts be like, for over 50 rich white people. Sage fucking insurance, fucking F&O cruises. And it's like, it's not targeted to me and it doesn't hurt me. I can listen to it and it's not like I can feel it trying to tap into me. Whereas then if I watch a YouTube video specific to me, the two fucking adverts that lead to it that you can't fucking get around on your phone, unless you buy the new premium, twats. They are so fucking targeted. That is like, you are clearly, and sometimes it's a guy going, are you between the age of 32 and 35? And I'm like, you fucking know I am.
Yeah, I know.
So literally you click on immediately like, no, just fuck you.
Yeah, that's what makes it so frightening though as well, because the more and more the algorithms are tailored towards what we are watching and ingestion through content, the more it becomes so specific and blinded to anything that could potentially be, I've not tried that, or maybe see what that is. And it's weird.
We need the novel, we need the unique, the different. You need to suddenly go, I'm going to try something new on the menu.
Yeah, it's important.
Fucking open your mind, man.
Do you know what's impressive though? Like when you mentioned that area, like to understand just a minute ago about the dopamine circuitry and how you could become addicted to sex and other substances and stuff like that, and it's about learning how to use it. That's actually one of the best descriptions of how I am with cannabis. So cannabis can 100% make it that you do fuck all. You're drowned in the sensation and you do nothing. But at the same time, because I was thinking about that, about how it is, and it's like the reality is every single piece of work I've done has been under the influence of cannabis, whether in the varying rates, the varying ingestion levels obviously differ. But what I've noticed the best about it is that when you're sitting and you're like, fuck, every time you, like, if I was to take like a draw off a pipe or a draw off a joint, the dopamine kicks in, goes back to fucking baseline. I'm at zero, and I'm at a position where I'm like, quality, I can do another 3 pages. And then you get to 3 pages, you feel relatively exhausted. It's essentially a stimulant. And used in that manner. And it's because I'm aware of the dopamine process. Don't get me wrong, the amount of times I'll be like, right, here, we're going to get some busy work, 2 joints in, I'm like, nothing go done, fuck. That does happen, inevitably. But the truth is, the vast majority of the work that I'm producing is done with with cannabis right next to it, but on such a minimal scale that I'm allowing the receptors to be activated. I'm allowing the neurochemicals which are relevant to be productive to arrive, but I'm not overwhelming myself by the sensation. And that's what's so crucial, because I'll be honest, it took me a long time. One of the things I had to stop doing was taking buckets and plungers. I don't know what you, maybe waterfalls, but I had to stop them.
Gravity bongs to our American listeners.
Yeah, I had to stop all that shit, man, because I would take like 1 or 2, man, and your day is over. It's just done. And that's why I was like, fuck.
Yeah, a bucket is just,
you're done.
That's like you walk in and you've got this spectrum of alcohol, and you're like, I can have a nice little shandy. Like, no, I'm gonna have a half a pint of absinthe. No matter what even the bud is, it's the delivery mechanism. You just literally go, I'm gonna empty all of my lungs, I'm gonna absorb all of the weed all at once, get it in every part of me, and then get a cough to make myself lighter-headed to fucking get the blood flow moving even fucking further. And yeah, you're gonna be instantly
just ripped as fuck, because we used to like that was our method the entire fucking teenage years, man. Right? It's so
that's
funny.
My youth for you.
There'd be some folks' house, like I remember like, it doesn't matter his name, but it's like in case he's watching. But I remember I go to his house, man, this guy's house, and some of us like I'd be with my mates, and I'd be like, right, we're down at so and so's house. He'll have a small laugh, nut. And the reason why I even know I go to his house is because his bucket would be disgusting. You'd be like, mate, fucking change that. But it would become like enjoying how disgusting. So there'd be cigarette butts in it, and it'd be like, it'd be fucking brown. There'd be
you get like an odd like affinity and attachment to it. It's so weird, the inanimate objects that we grow these things for. I've now got 3 sticks that I call sticky from 3 different Changa experiences, where basically with my special stone pipe and mix up my to mix up the bowl. So I find a stick where when I'm camping in the woods or whatever, and like carve it up a little bit, and then obviously go on a wild fucking experience of all kinds of different fucking highs. Especially shout out to fucking my shaman man, delivering with the MEOs recently some little capsules that you mix that with some Changa. That's an interesting. It's like a shortcut to kind of a smokable ayahuasca almost in a way. So it's a weird kind of like whoa. But yeah, then coming back from the experience, then this stick is like an augmented reality in the experience that I can't remember of the high, the peaks of it, you know, that are immediately lost to you in sobriety, are almost distilled within this object. So then I can look at the stick and be like, that was that in the woods. And you kind of, in the same way you have like photos around the house, or you pick up stones from beaches or whatever, and you remember it, and you look at the object, and it's almost like it triggers you, but it's like it's augmented, it's external from you. You see the object. Yes, it triggers in you, but it's like, I think the more of those things that you can kind of have in your life, I think it's a sign that you're trying to clear your mind. You're almost like something. You're putting things out so you can use more of it. Either you're trying to use more of it, or you're trying to shut it out. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Even that thing I totally agree, Simpa, and it's like that whole, there's an innate desire inside humans for that kind of thing. And I was actually describing it to my son the other day because I want to get a dog. And I kept saying that to him, and I was thinking about what that is. So why do humans do that? I mean, obviously, these are variable reasons, company, companionship, etc., etc., etc. But the reality is, humans require a direction, an outlet for love and empathy and compassion. It's emotion, and that's what your pet is. It's nothing but a tool that you use to express love and compassion in a utilitarian manner. That's going on there. And unless you're a fucking lunatic that beats your animals and shit, you shouldn't even have them. But like the basis, the fundamental reason for having that kind of, that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, why is it you're doing it? You're doing it so you could just express that thing. So there's something innate in humans to do that thing. Well, we're social animals, and obviously that's inevitably going to be the case. Seeking connection as well. And I think what humans find in predominantly, especially cats and dogs, is a sincerity, a genuine purity and innocence, in that you earn that affection and that love, and they don't begrudge you being late. They don't begrudge you having a bad day. They don't begrudge, you know what I mean? They are a cornerstone of something foundational that you can build your life around. Obviously, unfortunately, only for 10, 15, 20 years if you're lucky, sort of thing, you know? But again, I think that in a certain way is this augmentation. You're putting that emotion into it. Do you know what I mean? And then so you can, and I think we have these drives, and I think it's something that Falnock, or whatever that company, ever pronounce his name, the writer of Fight Club sort of tapped into. It was saying this we have a violent instinct and a love instinct. We have all of these primal things within us that it's energy. And so I've looked at, if you look at Tai Chi, all of the moves from Tai Chi come from movements within the animal kingdom. And so great sort of masters of various skill sets over the years basically looked and observed sort of how a crane would land and what it would do with its wings and how it would dispel the energy. So in the air, you look at a bird and you think, fuck me, that's got to be using a lot of it, like the constant, and it's not, it's in flow and its muscles are engaged into that kind of flow. And then when it lands, it's dispelling the energy. When like a dog gets nervous and it wags in a certain way, you know, when cats stretch and do different moves, they're dispelling energy from them. They've instinctively got a way to remove that energy. And because we're not like foraging and walking for miles or whatever, we're not climbing, we're not using muscle sets and groups, and we're not, you know, for all the term, rough housing, you know, I mean, we're not physical beings as much as we've been through our history. You know, people barely hug and have, especially post fucking pandemic, you know, we were actually starting to get somewhere, I felt, in society. Men would fucking bear cuddle and that. There'd be an exchange of energy, of hormones, of pheromones, of all the fucking other biological wonders that signal to each other in that intimate setting, you know what I mean? And I think an absence of that has been incredibly detrimental. And again, to sort of bring it back into cannabis and other drugs, I think that, and not just even that, even things like yoga, and one of the things I made a point of earlier, literally just says being alone. And you said about people saying it being sort of a bad thing. And I understand why society can think that, but I am of the same mindset that I retreat into myself and into the world, the space that I'm lucky enough to inhabit, that is my own, that is my safety and my protection. And within it, I seek to learn and to better myself. So any of the kind of prejudices that I hold, any of the kind of negative feeling and kind of regret of the previous day or whatever, I go, all right, well, next time I leave the house, I'm this, I'm that. And you're making that commitment to yourself, you're making that promise, and you're trying to then continually better yourself. And if you don't have that solitude, that reflective period, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, fucking incense sticks and candles and and all the rest of it at all. Obviously, that is a wonderful utility. And if you can get to a space like that, it is wondrous to actually create an intentional space that the only time you occupy it is to be in that space. You then strengthen that space within your brain to be able to take it out into the wider world. But you can find that in sort of the Zen Buddhists describe it. Like Zen is in everything. Doing the washing up, you move into a state of flow. Yeah, you know, your hands, you're not doing anything. You're dedicating time. You're just standing there doing the things your hands know how to do. And then in that time, you can go away with your brain. You know, Einstein said fucking getting a job at the patent office was one of the best things for him. Obviously, the Family Guy joke that he stole all the patents from the post office that he saw coming in. But he said that the best time, he found it to be the best time because it allowed him to have boredom, to have long periods of time where his brain could actually just daydream. He could function and just do the job mechanically. But because he chose to engage that part of his brain, it could go off and come up with all of this sort of wondrous ideas and what do you call them, like thought experiments.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's interesting because a quote popped to mind that it's when you're talking about how it's perceived as, you know, being alone is perceived as a negative for your mental health, and or you know, socialization is obviously necessary, but being alone is so crucial. And Charles Bukowski, he's got a quote where he says, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, he's fucking brilliant. Yeah, he says, people empty me, I have to go away to refill. And that's how it feels, you know. It's like you feel we are energy creatures, we're frequency-oriented creatures. So you do, and I think that's what's so important about being in the company of other individuals who represent the same frequency in which you emit. Because, I mean, the amount of times that, and I think that's what you feel at work, like when you go to a job that you fucking hate, you know, it's destroying you, it's emptying you every day. And if you really don't go home and put yourself in a mentality, or even when you're at your work, spend the entire time when you're present, as you're mentioning, going into this other place, so you're mechanically there, you're mechanically doing the actions, but your psychology is back to your dream, it's back at your home, it's back at your baseline of what you want to achieve. And I think that's what helped me so much when, I mean, literally, man, it'd be 9.5 hours of me washing dishes in the same spot. And that, it was brutal. And at the same time, though, the amount of times that I got my best ideas there, and I felt like bizarre. I mean, I'd be doing the dishes for 2.5 hours, man, and thinking about what I was going to be drawing at my break. And then I'd be like, when I'd be drawing at my break, I'd be thinking about, right, I need to get this done, so I'm doing this tonight. And so I was never there psychologically. I was always in a position where I was there mechanically, but I was never in that position where I allowed myself to be fully empty, because the whole thing to be fully empty, you really have to give all yourself to I was never there all the time. I was fucking miles away, and and I think it's so crucial for anybody listening, that if you're in a position where you're like, oh, I fucking hate this job, blah blah, it's like, use it to your advantage. Like if it's, and I actually wrote this in the book, the Productive Path book, that if you're in a job, and people that have been in a job 15 years or longer or less time, a few years, whatever, even fucking a few months, makes no difference. But people, I think it's more applicable to people that have been in a job for a long period of time, because they go, I can't do my dream, I've been doing this job so long, etc., etc., etc. You're in an even more prime position to pursue your dream, because you've been in your job so long, you know it fucking inside out. So you can switch off, and you can focus all of your psychological energy towards what it is you want to relieve you from that difficulty. And I think that's what's so important, is that it really makes no difference to what it is you're doing, the position you're in, what you've been experiencing. Every single thing is not, every action of life as a ladder, as a step on the ladder towards a better person. And that's 100%. I would agree with that.
It's one of those optic illusions. You get to the top of the ladder and you realize you're at the bottom again. Yeah, it's a never-ending process. It's not a destination. Life is the journey, and I think too many people get kind of lost in that. We're at the time, but I'd like to cover a few news topics, if that's all right, because a few things have happened. Obviously, circle back to Biden. Obviously, announced yesterday the simple possession as they have termed it, marijuana. Obviously, I think my listeners are quite aware of my stance on the
propaganda term marijuana.
Very much so. He did not use the word cannabis once whatsoever, and he was literally talking about racial disparities, when we know that marijuana with a J was actually propagated and promulgated by Harry J. Anslinger, because originally, if you look at the Marijuana Tax Act, that is a H, not a J. They added the J because they wanted it to sound more like Tijuana and to be more referenceable to a foreign entity, as if it was something that hadn't been on the American peninsula for a hell of an amount of time. If we then go back to sort of the Vikings and their arrival onto the northeast corner, I can't get my global geography, northeast corner of America, centuries before the British took cannabis in the 1600s. So yeah, it's been there a while. But yeah, basically he announced they're going to pardon all federal cannabis convictions. Several publications stated that there was basically no one was going to be affected by this. This isn't true. There's about 6,500 people. Unfortunately, what it means is that it's simple cannabis possession alone. So if you've got cultivation, trafficking, sales, if you were carrying a weapon, if any extenuating circumstance, and obviously the American judiciary system has one hell of a book to be able to put sort of poly crimes onto the record. So there's very few people actually, there should be a hell of a lot more people than just those few that should receive this, but they will be caught up with like literally jaywalking plus possession. You ain't fucking getting your record expunged, sort of thing. There is no real framework for what this means about then decriminalizing possession at the federal level, or how this can then be enforced. Obviously, states' law. There is a legal precedent for what it's called, and I can't remember what the hell it is. It's something act that basically means that the states were given a decision on cannabis, which meant even if they legalize within the regions, they can still have not principalities, what do they call them in America? Like townships, counties, areas, regions where they could still have cannabis prohibited. But then if under the federal level, does that affect this? There's going to be a lot of nuance here. And I think you can have some kickback from some of the holdouts in America, for all there's only a handful of states at this point. But I just wanted to kind of get on record my thoughts on this. I did post for the first time in quite a while on Instagram this morning, stating that I believe the fact that the American US midterm elections are about 5-6 weeks away. So I think this is just Biden reassuring, he's had basically 2 years. They could have fucking done this. Arguably, there's been COVID, etc. But they could have fucking done. I said it again. God damn it! This is going to harm us on YouTube right here. But I don't care. Whatever. Share this. That's all it means, folks. Share this video, please. But basically, I think they're going to get through the midterms and then be like, oh, there's this issue with states' rights. Oh, there's the issue with fucking like tax avoidance. There's an issue with proceeds of crime. There's an issue with, and they're going to drag heels further on it. And that that's what I effectively think. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people in our community in the UK and Europe are celebrating this, and I just think it's a little bit premature. And I just, wanted to get it kind of on record and obviously get your opinion on what you think it is, what it means, and what it could be.
To be honest, it's kind of similar to yourself, Simpa. It's like there's a inevitable win because it's a small amount of progress. So inevitably, it's like, oh, it's good that happened. So that's the theme. It's good. But if you look at the wider perspective of what's going on, it's a delay tactic and nothing more. That's like, the reality is. Sorry?
It's placation.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And that's now what we're dealing with now. So because of the science has been extremely helpful for everybody who's relating to cannabis. There is no longer, so before 2000s, really, before, Russo's fucking work and all these different things that, Michelin's work in the 90s, all that kind of stuff. Before then, it was very easy to get bogged down in the dialogue of the propaganda, schizophrenia, blah, blah, and all the buzzwords that are now, a lot of them are disregarded as if anybody just threw them out, you'd be like, fuck, man, how old are you, man? You still saying this shit? But, so science helped a lot to neutralise a lot of stuff. So it kind of took the starting point of where cannabis should be discussed and brought it right to the forefront of like, okay, there is a general acceptance of medical efficacy. And obviously it's harm in context of recreational use compared to alcohol is obviously non-existent. Alcohol is obviously much more harmful. So with that starting point, and we're all on that starting point globally, essentially taking away countries which are fucking archaic, UK being one of them, but nevertheless. But it's like essentially that's what we're at the starting point now, where it's always medically it's fine, blah blah blah. So now what's the next technique? What are they going to do? They're now going to, as we mentioned before, compartmentalize and apply baby steps of progress, quote unquote progress, which will appease a small number of people who are in favour of cannabis, and it'll also give the impression to the people that are not really familiar with the true battle fucking for cannabis. They'll think that, oh yeah, everything's really good now. This is great. Cannabis is becoming so. When everybody, this is the thing, man. I mean, you're the same as me. I have no doubt that you probably started consuming cannabis early teens. I mean, I was like 13, 14. So I was like 2004. And one of the things that fucking bugs me so much is the individuals who have arrived on the scene in the past few years who are now essentially regarded as mainstream and informant people about cannabis. They have no fucking idea how long this has been. This is not acceptable in this situation now. It's like 2004, the amount of times that I would be fucking... It was a nightmare. Most of the viewers will be familiar. It was a fucking nightmare. And now we're in a position where individuals that back in 2004, 2005 would have been like, oh, cannabis is bad, blah, blah, blah. And now they're, oh, yeah, well, that's fine. It's cool. We'll talk about this. And I think that's the thing that bugs me so much is that what's perceived as progress is only perceived by progress if people have just arrived. People that are actually familiar with cannabis for the past 20 years are like, this is unacceptable movements because of the fact it's been so fucking long. So that's inevitably it is a fraction of progress because some people won't be put inside, some people will be released and all that kind of stuff. But for people that have been in it for a while, man, it's just more of the same. All they're doing now is they've flipped a tactic. The language is now been more focused because of science, but now the tactic is baby steps. That's all that's going on here. And they're going to it'll be a regional element, it'll be a fucking like a small geographical element, it'll be this. These small baby steps, wherever they can find their baby steps to prevent access. That's all that's going on here, and to maximize profiteering. That's all that's going on.
Yeah, the image in my head is it's actually Takeshi's Castle. Do you know the stepping stones you step on in the fall? But it was that image, but it's big stones, little stones. Yeah. So there's like 100 little stones, and then I've got another step. So you could take 3 strides and cross this fucker, but you are literally tiptoeing across. And the other thing is that on average of the American and actually some Canadian cannabis stocks jumped as much as 20%. So obviously, I'm not necessarily suggesting that Biden has shares in cannabis companies, but obviously, if you look at somebody like Russell Brand's work around, like Nancy Pelosi and her alleged huge letters YouTube, alleged insider trading. Please get the alleged there, YouTube. So again, I think it's an interesting contrast because in the other bit of news I wanted to talk to you about was calls for cannabis to make a Class A drug at Tory conference.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. That was a fucking belter.
This is scary though because we're laughing. Yet one of the I'm trying to find his goddamn name. One of the individuals involved in this is a PCC from up my way, down my way from your perspective, I guess, or whatever direction you are from the world, somewhere in the northeast of England. This PCC basically pulled the funding for former guest Danny Ahmed, who did the supervised heroin injection here in the UK. And they had some amazing successes stabilizing people's lives, getting people clean, diverting people from intravenous disease and overdose, and were brilliant. And they basically just had all their funding yanked. But he is one of the individuals. It's an interesting point that the British tabloid presses, they basically went and presented this as if it's Tory policy, when actually what's effectively happened is they were laughed off the stage at the conference. They presented this idea and their own peers, their own contemporaries were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And the only thing that I can think in this is, or my fear, I thought I was going to try and unretire my tinfoil hat from somewhere, but it doesn't exist anymore. But my worry here is they're going to continue to push this big M, big C medical, air quotes, medical cannabis paradigm. Medicinal cannabis. I'm obviously doing a series, which actually, folks, update. Part 3 will be out next week, or this week when this is released, I think. I don't know how time works. Yeah. It moves forward endlessly. We're waving like a fucking queen there. Jesus but yeah, my point being that they're going to get weaponized that further and further. So then going, all right, we can prescribe this, we can give you it, but you can only ever vaporize it. You can only ever use it in these spaces at these times in these amounts. Whereas then if you grow it at home or you buy it on the street, it'd be a class A. So then they'll want to try and separate it. They're going, I believe that actually that when they're saying that cannabis is like heroin, they're kind of right in a weird way, because they've now made it a medicinal product. So whereas before it was just a drug that didn't have therapeutic value and had some propensity towards abuse. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now they've given it therapeutic value and it still has a propensity towards abuse. That's the same language as heroin. We've goose-stepped ourselves into this. They've walked us into this. The harder we've gone, medical this, medicine this. And for a small section of society, those newcomers that are just people that, yes, righteously, correctly need it for their condition, for their children, for their small sect, their tribe, all well and good for them. But it betrays the legacy century of activists, of individuals that have tried to fight this, that have protected this plant. The shoulders that you and I stand upon today. You know what I mean? Hopefully someday others will stand upon ours and keep going until eventually we can lift us all out of this hole, retrospectively, historically, so we can all have that vindication for all being posthumously. It's still... That's what I'm fighting for. I know that the things I know I'm right about, I'm never going to get known to be right about in my lifetime. But it's still worth fucking, as the Israeli proverb says, plant those date trees. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And the thing is as well, like when it comes to the discussion that you're referring to, I didn't see the article, but I've seen enough of it for it to just make me fucking laugh that they got laughed off the thing. But what it seems, to be honest, in my mind when I first seen over it was, first off, there are still individuals in certain spectrums of society that do believe those things, that are so regimented, and you do find them in hierarchical, police in particular, politics, where individuals haven't allowed themselves into circles where they can fully educate themselves on cannabis, so they believe that cannabis is this extremely dangerous substance. There's that part where there are subjective individuals who are ignorant towards the fact. Then there's the other part where there is a conscious attempt at diluting the dialogue around cannabis in order to allow profit to maintain, as you're mentioning, towards the medical side. And sometimes I just think to myself that this is just more of the same game. It's that they just throw out the same bullshit, the same stuff, the same cycles in order to delay. It's exhausting. And sometimes, the fact that when it said that they got laughed off, that's brilliant. I love that. I love that so much. Like, the people are like, cannabis and heroin are the same, and then the crowd erupts with laughter, man. That's fucking, if it was like that, that's brilliant. But yeah, it's just, it's bizarre. It's funny that actually you're saying that, like, obviously, hopefully you see it another time or whatever, or like probably when we're not around. But personally, because I'm going to do I'm doing a single skinner for Fat Nugs magazine. It'll be the third one I've done, and it's what I'm going to do. It's just a one-page thing, and I'm going to do my intention. It's going to be called Time, and essentially it's going to start off with, and it's just relevant. That's why I'm saying this. It's going to start off with Cannaman and Donnie sitting on the couch discussing how cannabis is so powerful, and it impacts our lives personally, and it's good, and it helps everybody, and it's going to be crazy. And the whole theme, that's why it's called Time, is that it's going to end with Cannaman and Donnie saying to some younger generations, as old men are going to have grey beards, and they're going to be saying to these younger generations,
when we were younger, it was like this, and they're going to describe the propaganda and the stigmatization and all these other unfortunate, detrimental and tragic connections towards cannabis being prohibited. And the response in this comic that I'm going to do is going to be the young guys being like, shut the fuck up, you old cunt, that never happened. And that's what I think it's going to be like, because at the moment, the people that are arriving in the cannabis, and it's great to have as many people on as we can, but the truth is, the individuals that are new to cannabis, they don't think it was as bad as it has been in the past, and that will continue. And I think personally that in 20 or 30 years, without there being a complete censorship of media through obviously taking away all the crazy shit and all that kind of stuff, some people won't believe this. They'll think that it wasn't. They'll think that, nah, man, you're over exaggerating. This is just bullshit. Just
prohibitionist deniers.
Yeah, exactly. That's what essentially, and that's my fear, is that in my lifetime, I'm going to be that old dude who's like, you wee bastard with your Starbucks coffee, you know, that kind of shit. And it's because of the fact that it's like, they're just like, nah, man, we got to get new. I'm all for ready access and all that kind of thing, but I'm not for the dilution of the reality. And I think that's what we're walking towards. And I think things, you know, that's just a delayed tactic. I think cannabis and heroin potentially mixed in with some subjective ignorance. But I do think that that's maybe what we're walking to, is we're going to walk to a point where people are going to think this was never like this. They're going to think that it's like, nah, man, it was never as bad as that. You weren't, you know, and that's what I think. That's what this feels like. It just feels, and it does. The way it feels more like that is because, you know, new arrivals kind of dilute the reality, because it's like, you know, when I hear people saying that, it's like, it's good now it's becoming so promoted. No, it's good now. And in my mind, I'm like, where? Like, yeah, we're having conversations about this. You can get access, but this is a very small fraction compared to what was like, man. It's like, this is not as open as everybody pretends, man. This is still fucking present, you know?
Yeah, man, the image in my head was a lava lamp, and was if the globs form and mass and break away, and then small fragments move into the big, and the big, and conceptually you can't quite tell what is what, especially in the multicolored ones, and then when they change. And it's the same with like these conceptual ideas that a mass of society want this thing. All of a sudden others, like we saw with the campaign with the, I would say, weaponization and frankly abuse of a multitude of parents of children, of parents of sick children in the UK by the press and by various campaigns. They then brought a new awareness to it, and it's kind of like they globbed and have taken a large section out. Yeah. And then in it, they're trying to form, and we're like, so they've taken power, and then eventually it'll glob back again, and then more, and it just, and it's in this free flow, and it's just going to keep forming and breaking apart and forming and break. But there will always be that continual evolution where then the idea of someone going to prison for first offense cultivation for plants anywhere in the country being absurd, for example, you know, or we get these little gradual, almost accidental milestones through precedents in courts, through it turning up in Coronation Street or whatever. But as we're seeing now is, I believe that the medicinal cannabis industrial complex, as I call it, it's using the same marketing and advertising gimmicks that we were speaking of before to get ahead of the curve. Cannabis is already out there more than it's ever been, and they can't stop it anymore. And it's absurd for them to stand up and go, let's make it a Class A and lock everyone up for life for dealing it, etc. But what they can then do is go, actually, no, and reframe the narrative. And if they can reframe cannabis from being a dangerous drug to being, it's just an unregulated medicine. We've just figured it out. So actually now what happens is it's all medicine when we'd have it, and we're the only ones that are allowed to produce it because we've got the licenses and the white coats, and then it's be the same as they'll then argue. It's like, well, it's like the same as you're producing your own diazepam. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? No one would protect or want you to do that. If you need it, you can go and get it only through these strict avenues. Yeah. And that's what I felt all along, is that they're trying to do is co-opt, to steal, to reach in and asset strip our culture and community and build this for-profit system of medical this, medical that. And it's like, no, it's a fucking plant. And it's all of ours. It should be freely grown all over the fucking planet. If you want to talk about cannabis for its fucking medicinal value, the best thing you could do with it is grow billions of plants across the planet. Carbon sequestration. Do you know what I mean? We could then move it into fibers, and we could move it into biofuels, get rid of petroleums, BPAs and BPZ in our products. We could go to move it into paper, get rid of dioxins. They would have far more of an impact to human health than allowing 200, 300 people that have a certain specific condition allowed one compound on license that it's a con, it's a farce. It's not even close to ever going to be enough. It's a plant. It is already here. The Americans destroy tens of millions of plants, right? The DEA's federal budget for destroying cannabis plants, the vast majority of it goes still towards feral cannabis. Tens of millions of plants just grow every year. Because do you know what I learned recently, right? Cannabis seed can stay underground for 20 fucking years. A healthy seed, you plant, grows, boom, drops into the fucking cycle, and it can sit underground for like 20 fucking years. And then it can just go, all right, cool, boom, grow. So they eradicate, and what they do is they then end up with these hermaphroditic plants with trillions of seeds, eradicate it and smash all these seeds in the ground. Then they come back the next cycle and go, who's planted all this cannabis? Where's all the... And they use all these chemicals and they do all this shit and they're wasting millions. Yeah. Tens of millions in countries all across the world. And yet they're then going, we're going to build this giant warehouse with giant walls and barbed wire and cameras, security guards, dogs, and grow this plant in this concrete glass cage. Yeah. It's when you're talking about perspective and perception, like when you zoom out of it, the reason I work as hard as I do within this space, or I'm just so dogged, is I've seen it. And it can be just like tomatoes. It can be like, it's nothing. It's once we get beyond all of this shit, it is just still a plant. Yes, some people will abuse it, but you know what? Some fucking people abuse tomatoes. Yeah. So I know some people still eat like a 5-year-old. Half a bottle of ketchup. Yeah. You know what I mean? The amount of sugar and shit that's in there, that's far more detrimental to the average, and to every consumer. That bottle of ketchup would be harmful because of the level of sugar, salt, etc. Yeah. Whereas the cannabis, the same level to every person in the population, it's only going to be a very select few in certain circumstances that could potentially have a negative outcome. Yeah. So therefore, it's an absurdity. You don't criminalize something because it can potentially, in some circumstance. We invented cars and then very quickly went, oh, fuck, right. The rubber needs to be solid, right? We need roads. What's a road? We'll figure that out, right? Signs, that's a good idea. Traffic lights, cool. Seat belts, mirrors. The glass has to be shatterproof. You know, we had iterations of learning that man can drive a car at some cases 300. What was the fucking drag record I saw the other day? 338 miles an hour. I think the new drag record is in drag car racing, not drag queens racing.
The boys absolutely busting to get him.
The image in my head of them, it was literally is a drag queen next to a drag car. Yeah. But yeah, my point is that we've then been able to go from the idea of literally when they invented the car, the newspapers were saying, man cannot go 25 miles an hour. His internal organs will combust. Yeah. Literally. And now we're like 2, 3, and literally we're breaking sound barriers in like the Blue Bolt project or a Blue Bottle or whatever it was called, the car. And they're like 6, 7, they're like Mach, whatever it is in terms of the sound barriers they're breaking. And again, we've learned how to fucking do that. The same could be true of drugs, but we're still ignorantly going, well, why are these people got cars? But it's your responsibility to build us roads. If you built us roads and an infrastructure for us to take the drugs that we are taking, the vast majority of the problems would vanish. If you then take poverty and actually then start to deal with individual trauma, the other shit disappears. Then if you look truly at epigenetics, you can then go, all right, boom, we can test your dad and it'll tell us if you as a kid shouldn't take these fucking drugs, or at least if you do, we recommend you take this with it. And you're given education and advice, never punitive. It should be through fucking education and awareness, not through the caution, through fear. They've tried that for centuries, and guess what? More people than ever take more drugs than ever. Yeah. It's
funny that I was going to say this. It's funny you say that, man, because it's like, and first off, it reminded me when you're talking about the epigenetic basis, that's how far the medicine's becoming in Canada when it comes to them. They'll try and study what's required for your endocannabinoid system profile. And then that's at a stage where they're able to define a phytochemical profile in which will complement your endocannabinoid system baseline. But again, what that thing you're talking about educating people, that's actually one of the side. It was a side consequence of doing the animation series, because one of the things I think is an extremely efficient method of educating the public is kind of like a backdoor method, which is where you kind of invade the cultural mindset without being explicitly cannabis. Because very often, if you have and I know that it's difficult because he's got a fucking cannabis leaf on his forehead, but it's difficult, man, because it's like, I do think to myself, cartoons are colourful, people kind of get drawn to it. So if the cartoon's all about an adventure thing, but the undertone is cannabis themed, that's kind of powerful, and it'll draw people in. And I think that's the same thing with music. If you've got somebody that's singing a song, you like the song, and they've slipped in something relating to cannabis, that's embedded in your subconscious. And these are techniques which are really important, because sometimes it does feel like if you were to go across with an educational basis, I mean, with that book, A Case for Cannabis, that I wrote, it's like some people were getting turned off by it. I was like, hey, this is education by it. And it's like they immediately, do you know what it's kind of like? It's like some people wouldn't want to be shown the truth if you gave them the door. It's like the truth to your life through this door, as an example. And the one I can't fucking, because it jeopardizes their perceptions of how reality is. And I think sometimes it could just be, it's an efficient method to promote cannabis as a whole when you try and invade the cultural mindset of individuals when it's not explicitly cannabis, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. It becomes, the messaging can become blinded by the message. So sometimes almost the other way around. You know what I meant. But yeah, it's odd that we forget the intersectionality, the coalescing and the convergence of all of these different sections of our society, and that cannabis isn't just cannabis at all, in the it's just then another tool and another thing. And this is why frankly I want weed to be quite benign for the most part, in terms of so ubiquitous that it's just, all right, so weed, cool, all right, you got the gym, it's just a thing you do. Do you know what I mean? To get to that sort of point that then
people are almost bored talking about it. They're like, why are we still discussing this?
So then actual fucking research and discovery can be found again, because everything that's been discovered since Mashalem has basically been weaponized by that medicinal cannabis industrial complex. How do we medicinalize this plant? And if you look into the history, actually, this is probably giving you a bit of insight into part 3 of the Medical Con series I'm doing on my YouTube channel. If you look at the history and the invention of the hypodermic plunger needle, and then the synthesization of opium into the brand names by Bayer of heroin and some morphine and all these other things, and how that then kick-started this removal of the cultural consumption of opium. It used to just be, you just smoked opium. You didn't do it for medicinal reasons or recreational. You could either go have some pints, you could go have some opium, you could go smoke a bit of hashish, not quite often, depending on the culture, mixed with the opium. And then, then they went, all right, so people like this thing and they need it. So then they create a system going, all right, we control now all the opioids and all the stereoisomers and all of the like potential chemistry around it, so that you can't get, the only reason you get access to it is through the doctors. That's then just created intergenerational people that seek these things for soothing value, to deal with the trauma, the pain of their life, their mental state, their position, station, caste in life, whatever it may be, that they have to then manipulate a doctor. And then, oh, my back, oh, my this, oh, my that, or they have to then get it illicitly. Whereas if we then had the supply of all of these compounds in all which manner and ways, the people that would need them would seek toward them. But if we had that healthy society, as Bruce K. Alexander, who I reference quite often on this, is actually probably someone I should reach out to. I know he's obviously getting on in years, but he was a Canadian psychiatrist who basically created this thing called Rat Park, and he saw the studies of addiction that were based on rats in fucking horrible cold cages with water bottles with cocaine in. And they basically found the majority of the rats killed themselves with the cocaine water. So they had cocaine water or just water, and they could pick. Obviously, I know what I would fucking pick in that circumstance. So yeah, I can understand that. But then when Bruce came along, I went, oh, this is fucking backward. If you take the rat out of the cage, if you give him all of the ideal circumstance in life, would he still use the drug? And what they found is the majority of the rats would at some point in their lives try cocaine. They would try the cocaine-laced water. And what they found is actually at moments of trauma, at rejections, if they were rejected by a sexual partner, if they were, revoked, I can't even think of the word that I'm trying to say, they're removed from a societal setting, whether they'd done something to upset etiquette, what I mean, or they tried to mate with somebody they shouldn't have, etc., and they were then chastised and removed. They would then self-soothe by going to the drug again. Did you know what I mean? So they found that actually they very quickly just started using it as a tool. And it's the same that we do in society. But again, our perception is focused on the very minute population in all drug consumers that get to such a level of deprivation and addiction, and are then demonized by the rest of us, that they're driven further into it, that they're the ones we hold on a pedestal and go, that's what heroin use is, that's what crack use is, that's what meth use is. When actually, if you really delve into art, history, the history of like humanity in terms of art, music, literature, whole lot of motherfuckers using drugs. You know what I mean? It's like, as Bill Hicks says, that if you don't agree with people taking drugs, then go home and throw all your records. Because all of them high as shit. And there's just something in us that, the same, what did I describe it as on a recent podcast? Dizzy ducks. like when kids spin around and they're like, ah, they don't have a centrifugal thing in the brain until you start to hit puberty. Something happens where literally you get high. They get an experience of elation and ecstasy, so they spin around, they get themselves fucked up. They may as well be stacking lines of coke or whatever, because in their brain, they're doing the same thing. But we then don't look at that and go, don't do that. You're getting high. That's wrong. Yeah. They're experiencing joy. They found a mechanism by which they can experience joy. It's the same thing. It just so happens that there's a third party involved, whether it be a plant, a powder, a chemical, a fucking pill, whatever it may be. It's odd to me. The same even with gatherings. What they've done with free parties, and they've weaponized a free party against us. It's now a commercial. It's a music festival. I mean, shout out, go watch Woodstock '99 for anyone on Netflix. Brilliant 3-part series, basically showing the juxtaposition of the start of the free radical movement of free love and, kind of anti-capitalism and collectivism and localism, juxtaposed to then the capitalist intention of that 30 years later in 99. And you can then see how 20 years later we are where we are with some festivals in the UK where you're missing the point. You're buying a synthetic experience. You know what I mean? And even, I suppose, the synthetic drugs rather than a lot of the natural entheogenic ones are giving you an entirely different experience. And people are buying it for the videos and the Snapchats and the fucking selfies, and they're not there. They're not losing themselves for 4 days in a festival and finding themselves constantly, endlessly in different places at different times, in different ways, connecting to different people,
I think one of the things that's interesting about this as well, Simpa, is like there's a thing where we say that, again, it's that cyclic thing. It's like there's a book I'm reading at the moment, and it's talking about it mentions in it, there's a quote in it where the person talks about how, and it's like 2,000 years ago, and they say the youth is disorientated. They're not representing the values we had. The author's saying this about the youth at the time. This is a 2,000-year-old book, and the author's criticising the youth to say that they're going to be ambitionless and they're not going to be effective in society and And I'm reading this thing thinking, fuck's sake, this is 2,000 years ago, and it might as well be this week. And that's what makes me believe, like, what is it like? I don't know, man. It's a very peculiar thing. It's like we're just on the ride of life, and it's like you've just to kind of look around and take the most you can take from it, because it does seem like an cycle.
So yeah, the image that just came into my head there, you said ride. It was getting on a roller coaster and there's cars and you get in with so many people, and it's like a generation gets on in a car, and so they set off and they're experiencing the ride and they're further up and they know more about it, and they're looking back at the others and go, why aren't they reacting this way? Why aren't they don't know that part of the ride. Do you know what I mean? It's like we get grouped together, as we were sort of saying before, and we have these collective experiences and we get locked in moments of time, and that moves through, and the next generation, and we'll always look at the other ones and they'll be so abstract and be like, the fuck is that? And then the more you do it, the more you see the similarities to the ones above you. Obviously, you understand the difference, but you can see like, oh shit, that's why they said I was such an idiot. And then you go like, wait, I heard that song 20 years ago. And you remember your mum saying when you were little, I heard this when I was on the radio when I was a kid. Everything goes in cycles. And it's as you were saying, we almost regurgitate. And I think it's, as the Buddha says, of like mistakes will be repeated until lessons are learned. I think everything is constantly manifesting and destroying and manifesting in the same guise and ways through empire, colonizing, through fucking, whether it be in the spiritual realm, the intellectual realm, the physical realm, everything that we're doing is we're trying to answer the same fucking questions, and we almost have to get to a point and just something. Do
you know what it's kind of like?
Switch again.
It reminded me of the ocean, to be honest. If you're sitting and watch the water, I think that's what's so cathartic when I look at water, when the oceans comes and goes, because it's like that's what it's the oceans of time, man. And that's what it's kind of like. It's like every little particle of water and again it comes to that thing. It's like an individual particle of water added all together. It's a collective body, and it's that thing that's just, I don't know. Just when you see it coming in and it goes away, it comes in and it goes away, and I think that's takes you to that thing you mentioned before, where it's so crucial to be in the moment, to understand that you should just be grateful to be able to fucking repeat yourself. And I'm joking. I fucking said it twice there. No, you should just be grateful that you're able to perceive what you're going through. And I think that's what's so crucial about that. It's like, just enjoy life. Doesn't matter if it's a difficult circumstance, make the most from that thing. But I think it's just to be grateful is a really powerful emotional position, I think.
Yeah, man. I'm reminded of the end of some documentary in my head, and it's in a book of, is it the Upanishad? it's like a series of books in like pre-Tibetan like literature, and there's like a verse in that it's like, not that which the eyes can see, but the fact that the eyes can see, know that to be Brahma the eternal, or Brahma being God in this, and obviously God being a stand-in for the ever-pervasive consciousness. And then it goes on to say that not that which by the ears can hear, but that the ears can hear, know that to be Brahma the eternal. And it just keeps, and it lists off these things, and it's basically trying to get you to recognize that it is sentience itself is the answer, the question, the problem, all at once. Do you know what I mean? It's this curse and blessing of consciousness. And I think that the thing that if you can manifest and kind of like hold in your heart, for all that cliche as that sounds, but what I mean by that is if you can retain a sense of love and wonderment and curiosity toward the world in your core, then nothing can touch that. And if you can then focus into those moments of going, how wonderful it is that I'm getting to witness this car accident. How wonderful it, not necessarily in that extreme, but you know what I mean? In terms of you strengthen that muscle like an atrophied muscle, and the stronger it gets, then the easier it is in any moment to be resilient to, again, strengthen those chicken wings. I think we should round that. We've just got away with the time there. Look to wrap this up. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and again, I think we asked 2 questions. I do actually have notes, folks. I just want to show you like notes for the thing.
Hey, well, to be honest, Simpa, we could flip it around, man. And next week, I think I'm speaking to an individual during the week. I'm not sure. I'll have to speak to her first to make sure, so I'll mention her name. But I'll have to flip it around, man. I'll get you on the show. We'll just do I'll get you on, and we'll have it on fucking Cannaman TV this time, because I think that's twice on yours, man. So I mean, it just means that
man, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, because it means another couple of hours, man. Because let's say I could talk to you for a long time, man.
Likewise, man. And I think next time I'm gonna break out some of the Blue Dream CBD rather than the cherry pie, so I'll be a bit more on point and articulate. But yeah, man, thank you again for jumping in the hot seat and for just chatting shit with me for hours, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I do hope my listeners did too.
Yeah, same here, Simpa. This has been an absolute joy. Let's see, when you messaged over, man, I was delighted, because let's see, this is cathartic for me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we'll make this a regular thing, even if we're not filming it.
Yeah, fucking right, man.
Man. Yeah, definitely. Especially as we're both quite avid readers, we'll have our own little quiet book club. Actually, in the comments, you want to join? Jump in the comments. Actually,
I'll send you down the productive path and shit like that, and even the case for cannabis, see what you think, because let's say it's really fun.
I always love new literature, but I'm never necessarily, or not always, rather. It was terrible language. Not necessarily always in a position to be able to purchase it, unfortunately, at the minute, given the situation. But I would appreciate. I'm the same.
No, but that's what I mean, man. I've got several sitting here, man. I mean, that's one of I'll be honest with anybody watching, like, I buy all my fucking books and just give them to people. I'm in a position, because I asked my brother's dad asked me that. He's like, does anybody buy your books? I was like, I do, and then I fucking give them away for free.
It's still doing that groundwork, and it's even as you said, like the fact that your son can look forward to seeing this in retrospect. And I think, again, like, this is why I think the podcast that we're producing and that are so important to get these conversations. We're locking them in time. So no matter what the chads of the future, or the future yippies, or whatever, trying to pull up sort of derogatory titled groups here. I'm sorry, folks. Just whatever individuals happen to, try and whitewash our culture and our history, we have this account. And I think that in all guises, the work that you've produced does that. So more power to you, brother.
Appreciate it, bro. Honestly, I really appreciate it, Simpa. Thanks so much, man.
No worries. You're welcome to hang around while I do a bit of housekeeping, or you can just sign off now. It's up to you.
No, man, I'll fucking chill for a sec.
All right, sweet. All right, folks, that was episode 96, about 3 hours. If you've sat all the way through this, I commend you, and we'll release you to now go and empty thy bladder, go get a drink, roll up some doobs, and go enjoy your day, evening, or whatever. I don't know. Day and evening basically covers it. Middle of the day. If you're in the middle of the day, go really seize the day, fucking carpe diem and all that shit. If you enjoyed this stuff, please do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can help me keep this little project of mine going. Check us out on all social media platforms at Simpa Life. I know I keep saying this, but the website, slowly, you can't see, but there's a shitload of paperwork actually stapled to the wall behind me, which is how it will look. So give us a few more weeks and it will be there. All right, peace, love. Check out Conor everywhere in the links below, and we'll see you next week with somebody. That'll be cool. All right, peace and love, folks. Oh, that just lagged like a motherfucker there. Don't be playing this game, computer. Be nice. Be nice. Be nice. All right, we're good. We're good. Some good outtakes here already, at least.
90 minutes of outtakes.
Thank you, Zoom lady. Oh, dust the mic off.
I had to get the lighting of
been
it,
a while.
man. Yeah, I was the same. I had to get I had to get all this shit out of the bedroom and that.
Oh, right, we can do this. We can do this. Oh God, 96. Gonna make myself breathless there by stretching. Jesus Christ. I do that as a special one time just to fuck with people. I'll do it as like April Fool's Day episode or something. And yeah, just condense all of the fucking outtakes. Oh, right, here we go.